Hello, welcome to the FormABLE Podcast. My name is Jamie Sparling, and I am the head instructor of Affinity Martial Arts and Wellness in Wausau, Wisconsin. Here on the FormABLE Podcast, we talk about formable moments in the martial arts. Okay, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but we always have fun. Today, I have my good friend, Tim Becherer, from the Inosanto Academy out in to talk with us a little bit about his formable moments in martial arts. I'm sure he's going to bring up some really cool instructors as well as all of the incredible things that Mag offers, which is training gear as well as a great many things and an outstanding instructional on the Dos Manos for FMA. So once again, like, subscribe, and let's bring in Mr. Timmy Becherer. How are you, Tim?
Hey, I'm doing very good, Jamie. I really appreciate you inviting me here. It's a great honor to be on the show. Those of you might know that I do a podcast as well, so it's kind of fun to be on this end as well as being on the other end. Especially when it's this sort of biographical conversational thing, which is
yes,
absolutely what I enjoy talking about, stories, personal stories, that sort of thing. So all I can say is I hope you're surviving what sounds like a pretty miserable cold shot over in your part of the country. I've been getting messages from friends in Cleveland, Detroit, and you're in Wisconsin, right? And some other friends in Illinois talking about how cold it is. Like, woo! I'm not going to complain about it being a little chilly for us Californians at the moment.
Well, yes, sir. It's a different gig. We're at -8 today, and I don't know what the wind chill is. And I don't think after -8 I want to do any more math.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that was just
I remember those days.
Yeah, that's completely crazy. Later on, I want to talk to you about your podcast as well, because I have a really funny story that I want to tell you, and I want to do it.
Well, right. And I want to reverse roles some days. We got to get you on mine as well,
brother.
So if they hated us talking on this, just wait. You can come and hate more.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, like, subscribe, leave a nasty comment, and feel free to hate on.
That's right.
It's always absolutely fascinating the things that can happen on the internet. Oh, and I appreciate you doing this. One of the really cool things for me was when you took us to Master Omri Ban's school.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't have to do that, but...
Oh, of course. No, I did. I mean, in the end, I do. That's just... let's put it this way. So where I start with him. So if you guys aren't familiar as an audience with Omri Ban. So Omri Ban was was, and as far as like what I'm about to say about him, a champion in Pradal Suri, which is the Cambodian version of Muay Thai. And so it was the early 1960s. He became champion in the national champion in the sport there, and was champion until 1975. So a good over a decade of being the champion, fought over 360 some fights or something to that effect. I didn't look up the stats specifically but it's easy to find a line. And he won somewhere around 300 of the fights, and like 270 were by knockout, and most of his knockouts were elbow and knee. So this guy was like the Muhammad Ali of that sport in that place in that time. And then, if you know history, you know that in 75, the Khmer Rouge, or Khmer Rouge, as it would be kind of properly said, came to power in Cambodia and just completely wrecked that whole society. Took everyone that were, a little more modern society and said, we're going to reinvent this in the form of what they thought, I guess, communism was, which was they're going to make everybody rural. They moved people out of cities. And it was just a horrible genocide on their own people. And his youngest daughter has written a book. And it's called I Am Omri. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read it. Take you like 2 days. It's just a fascinating book. And he was a guy who was fortunate in that he was so famous, but most of the fights at that time were on radio. So they didn't know what he looked like. They knew his name. So he was able to survive through that because people didn't know exactly who he was. And the ones that did, that were part of the Khmer Rouge, were also fighters. So they didn't want to give themselves away. So it was like a mutual assured destruction why no one sort of pointed him out. And so big time survivor story with him. And so Guru Dan had known of him for a long time and was going to start studying with him, I want to say, probably at the same time he was starting to take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu pretty seriously. So it's been, 30 years, probably. Yeah, 30 years. And his desire to do a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just kind of took up time in the day. So he didn't have the time to go train with him. So, here we are. Guru Dan's a second-degree black belt Jiu-Jitsu at this point in time. And so he says, I want to go study with this guy. So fortunately for me, I'm around in this time period and I'm available. So I'm asked to go with him. And so I start studying with Omri too. And at one point, I remember on our way back from Long Beach, Guru says to me, it'd be nice if someone could help them organize kind of like Master Chai and all that. And so I took that as Guru, being Guru Dan, throwing a suggestion my way. It's something he thought I might be good at or good for, but in a way that I could, if I didn't want to, I could easily not, and it would be no harm, no foul. But because it's helping out someone I cherish a lot and was suggested by someone else that I cherish a lot, it's kind of become my thing. So I was initially wanting to do this in 2020, but we all know how life rapidly changed in 2020. So it's still in process, but part of that process is if people like yourself come into town and express an interest in training with him, I make that possible. So long-winded story to get what you just said, but yeah, that's it. Let's put it, it's just a mission for me.
It's great. I always enjoyed every time I saw Guru, and when Guru would talk about Master Omri, just I always wanted to work with him, and it just so happened that Michelle Kuzma had brought up to you, something, and I had no idea what this was going down, but then just randomly there was like a head turn in the car. It was like, would you like to go? I was like, wait, yeah, of course. You'd think I was going to say no. I just didn't think it was an option. So I remember going and training with Master Omri, and at one point, it was a long workout session throughout our time with Guru and everything or whatever, and Master Omri had pulled on my leg a little bit, and there was a pop, and he fixed my knee. By the way, I had been grappling at the Inosanto Academy, and something was slightly off. Okay. And it just was one of those things, and I have a bad knee and I have a bad shoulder, and just being a martial artist, when your body is like, woo. But Master Omri was so sweet on the way out. He was really worried that he had done something, and I was like, no, Master, I do believe that you just fixed my knee. And then I was trying to walk it, you know what I mean? At the best or whatever. And he felt so bad. It was just a little pop, ended up being a chiropractic adjustment,
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful. And he was just so sweet. And, that's a word we don't often use in martial art. But actually in our martial art family, it comes up a lot because Guru Dan is one of the most sweetest human beings that anybody could really ever meet. A kind word and saying hello. And he said some nice things to me at a time in my life when it was just about as bad as it could be. And when the darkness closed in, I had those words. And that really, really helped change my life. And he is something special. Yes, he is something special. As are you, Timmy.
Well, thank you.
Could we talk a little bit about Mao Mag and what was
Oh, sure.
what did you want to do with Mao Mag? And I think it's just fascinating, and I absolutely love the sticks. Okay, I have a
Oh, thank
gentleman
you.
who came in, and at first, the first time when I came to see you, I had bought some sticks. Okay, and
Hmm.
they were for me and my wife to train, and she didn't get to come with me, and she loves camouflage things, so I asked for you to get me camouflage Dos Manos sticks. So, right?
Right.
And my newest, well, now he's my Brazilian Jiu Jitsu professor who actually started right around the time I did or prior. But he also did these Japanese systems. And in the midst of it, I pulled him out and he started playing with them. And I was like, well, that's it. That's it. We're gonna buy as many as we can, and I gave everybody had a shot to pick some up, and it's just worked like such a charm, especially after coming back from the academy where we would do things with double stick and single stick, like the figure eight series, and then
Hmm.
immediately grab the Dos Manos and do it with that. It blew my mind. I had so much fun. Now, on days that it's nice, we go outside in the parking lot quite often and do Dos Manos, man. And I thank you for that,
Wow. Oh
because
yeah, of course, man. I appreciate you, getting into it and sharing your experience with it.
it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I do believe I wrote a review. If I didn't, I'm gonna. And, well,
Awesome.
here it is right here anyway. So, even if I forget at some point, it's on there. Uh,
Okay.
Tell me all about Malmag and where you came up with that idea,
Okay.
brother.
Sure. So Malmag's just short for Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and you're old like me, so you remember the days of like really having a newsstand and a lot of magazines on a newsstand. And then for us, a lot of martial arts magazines. There
Mm-hmm.
were Black Belt, Inside Kung Fu, Inside Karate, Karate Kung Fu Illustrated. Kick magazine was around for a while. That I think turned into Karate Illustrated or something. It continued to just change its name. There were martial arts movies. There was like just a ton. There was a good handful of really good magazines out there. And for those of us kind of coming of age in martial arts in the 1980s, that was the primary way to really get information, exposure to different martial arts and information. Books were there, obviously. They were nice, but they were, expensive for those of us who were young,
Mm-hmm.
paying for things with your paper out. But magazines were a little more accessible. So, you would save and buy the occasional book. I bought plenty of those, but magazines were something that I was just getting monthly, several of them. And then I want to say, I guess in the 90s, once UFC kind of hit, things took more of a, I want to say, gossipy turn in the magazines, because I think a lot of people kind of were turned off by the way they were covering things, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more tabloidy type stuff. And then with the change in the way people consume media, print magazine is kind of all but dead. There's a few out there, and I think something like fashion magazines will probably still exist just because of the nature of that. But martial art magazines are relatively dead in print form. I think Black
Mm-hmm.
Belt has just come back. They've changed hands a bunch of times from what I can understand, and it went from initially a monthly magazine to every other month, and now I think it's quarterly. So they're, in my mind anyway, I have a strong desire for those kind of good quality magazines to come back, but maybe not in the way of print, because that's an awfully expensive
Yeah.
way to go about things. So my idea was to take the way people are consuming media now, which is going to be electronic
Mm-hmm.
based, but also make it multimedia. So let's say where you would look at a interview in a magazine, it would be a transcript that you would read. Well, instead of that, just click on it and see and hear the interview itself. When you would look at techniques in a magazine or exercises, it would be a series of pictures. And
Yes.
I know we all hit that thing where we go, well, how did they get from picture number 3 to picture number 4? It's like, it doesn't make sense. And those are, now that I kind of know the industry a bit more, those are editorial choices. And the editorial choices tend to be sometimes made by people who don't understand what they're looking at. So they're looking at a picture aesthetic, but they're not looking at a technique flow because they don't necessarily understand the technique flow. So instead of having those issues, why not just have a video of the technique itself for the exercise? So that is my objective with this, is to build that eventually. Hopefully this year, we'll have something that looks more like that. What I started with was a website, and then there are articles on the main page, which is more of your traditional blog setup, where there'll be sort of like a 250 to 500 word article with 1 or 2 photos. So that's there. That will always be kind of a free thing for people to see. The podcast that I'm doing was sort of something that I thought is, again, a modern way that people are consuming things. So that kind of quickly became an easier thing to do, because especially with the Inosanto Academy, we had a lot of people that were interesting coming in and out of there. And I thought, in my very fortunate position there, being able to meet a lot of people, I can get them to sit and do interviews with me. And so the initial thought was, this is, before 2020, well, I'm going to have to bank a few, and I don't know how often I'll put them out, maybe once a month or something like this. I'm going to have to maybe travel. Well, one of the benefits we got from COVID, pretty awful thing that screwed us up a lot, but we got this medium that you and I are talking about now, Zoom, which I know existed before. It just wasn't something that would have been considered, especially with my career in television, a good quality thing. It would have been considered like, whatever. But I also didn't think people would be looking at movies on something this big like their phone either. So, the trend before that was bigger screen, bigger, wider screen. And now it's like, people are looking at things on a little phone. So it's a matter of what is an audience accepting. So an audience now accepts what we're doing here, where if you would have gone 30 years ago, they'd have said, oh, the audio bit rate isn't good enough, the video bit rate isn't good enough, and all this. Okay, well, that doesn't really matter as long as the audience is accepting it. So to most people, this quality is just perfectly fine. So I thought, great, that opens up a huge ability for me to now put out a podcast weekly, which I do. So now I can connect to people on this medium, Zoom. I mean, my season 3 opener, I was connected to Myanmar. I talked with Win Zinu, who was a Lethwei instructor in Myanmar. So I now have the ability with this technology to reach out to the other side of the world and talk to people. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And so that was sort of the first thing I think that I did as far as a multimedia piece. We're in our 3rd season now with that. Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, it's called. And the website itself, you brought up the sticks. There's a store on there. The sticks kind of came about with, we do FMA, and I don't know, something felt right about trying to make sticks myself. I bought other products, and there's a lot of people that make some really good products out there. And I thought I just kind of wanted to be more in touch with what I was doing by doing this. And I mean, I was a guy that was awful at shop class. Like, I couldn't build the birdhouse to work. My brother got all that talent. My brother was like very talented in woodworking and things like that. You could blindfold him and he could build a deck onto a house. I
don't have that, brother.
Yeah, I didn't either. So I got. The funny thing is how, like, I would say talent was distributed in my family. My mother and father were both good piano players. They didn't do it for a living, but it was a hobby for them. But they were both good. Like, if they played, you go, oh, hey, it's not someone just learning. That's someone who's put in some practice. My brother was that, woodworking and that kind of stuff. And for me, it was a visual medium. So I could shoot photography, shoot video, edit, and write. So that was kind of more my creative outlet. So to me, it just kind of felt fun to be able to get a hold of the rattan and research kind of how different people were making these sticks and kind of create my own way of doing it. And for a long time, I just, there was no brand. It was just, I was making sticks. And I've got a private client that started training with me in 2020 or 2021. I know it was during the COVID time period. And if you guys watch in the Midwest there, if you watch college football, Michigan football on Fox, you'll know him as the booth guy. Gus
Okay.
Johnson is his name. So he's the kind of the voice of Wolverines football. And so he lives out here in LA, and he was training with me, and he wanted a pair of sticks, so I made him a pair of sticks, and he says, "Yeah, I got me a pair of Timmy B's." I'm like, "Well, that's kind of a cool name." Well, the funny thing about him is I tend to teach all day Saturday, so I've never really seen him do his job until Fox did a documentary on him going to Harvard and doing a leadership program. I watched this documentary, and I'm seeing him do his job. Go, this guy's good. I mean, he's like one of the best, obviously, good job. And one thing he's known for is making, I think they called it Gusisms. So he'd make up these sort of like nicknames. And so my sticks are a Gusism, which is really awesome. And then I told that to one of the guys at the academy who was training there, named John Stern. And John goes, "Oh yeah, that's great." He's like, "Give me a couple days." And I thought he meant he wanted to buy some sticks. I'm like, "Sure, John, no worries." In 2 days, he comes back with a logo. So apparently he was a professional graphic designer. I didn't know that. So he created the whole Timmy B's logo for me. And it's like, "Here, you can have this if you like it." I'm like, so he didn't charge me anything. Made a really nice logo, which I now was initially putting on the sticks with a branding iron, but now I've got a laser etcher. So they're all going on with laser etching. And, I kind of expanded from there, staffs and dos manos, and that longer weapon stuff was sort of an outgrowth again of COVID, when we were outside and had more room to do some of that. And the instructional video that you're talking about, that's also sort of part of the magazine. Because if you remember back in the day, Black Belt Magazine had all those Panther videos, and Inside Kung Fu had unique videos. So that was stuff that was produced by them. Thought, well, let me follow suit. And right as we got locked outside in 2020 with COVID, so that was spring, if I remember right, like March is when that happened. It was Paula Inosanto who said, "Well, the inside's all available. You should make a Dos Manos instructional." So that was all her suggestion to me to make that. So I said, okay. She told me I could use downstairs, but you've been in the academy. It's busy. There's a lot of stuff on the walls. And I thought, well, that's from a filming, like a television perspective or a film perspective. Like, that's too busy of a background. People are going to be looking at all the stuff around me and not at me. So I went upstairs where I could have a blank white wall. So that's where I ended up shooting that. But it was really nice of her to let me take, basically it was a couple of weeks, but it wasn't like all through the week. We shot it on, I think it was 2 or 3 consecutive weekends. And it was funny because it being COVID, and early on where we weren't sure, like, will this kill you if you get it? How infectious is it? So it was literally just me and the guy you see in the video. We're also operating the cameras. So I had 3 cameras set up, and we would turn the cameras on, turn the sound on, and I would try to actually use him to sort of square it up. And then I'd run on there, we'd do the thing, and then we'd come off and turn it off. And that's just not normally the way you would shoot a video. You normally have someone operating all that stuff, but we were wanting to be careful given the situation at the time. So it was just the 2 of us, and I had to do a little resizing and recentering because it was didn't have anybody actually following with the camera, but it was really interesting and fun to do. And then I ended up cutting that into, I think it was 19 or 20 lessons essentially in one package. So it was really fun to do.
I enjoy your podcast so much.
Oh, thank you.
And one of the things, like, our martial art families, we have a lot of folks, right? And I feel that you bring a lot of great guests in, but it gives me an opportunity to listen and get to know some of the people that are in our martial art family that when I'm out at the academy, I might say hello, I might not. And part of that is that, I'm out there with the greatest martial artist in the world, and I'm trying to get what I'm trying to get. But the relationships in martial art, those are the things that are really, really important. And the more that
100%.
Yeah, brother, the more that I talk to my students, I am so blessed right now to have a good group. such a
Yes.
good group of human beings that the relationships are really what some folks are there for. They're,
Yeah.
better than anybody what we come for and what we need slash get. They're not the same things. They
No.
are not the
No.
same things if we can stick around long enough to see
Yeah.
that and appreciate that. So for myself, if when it comes up, and I know you have a YouTube channel where you offer a small glimpse, right? And then you go to the Gumroad page to learn more.
Right.
So it's awesome for me. As soon as it comes out, I'm checking it out because this is somebody in our martial arts family,
Right.
and that is something that I think is really, really important that people get to tell their stories, you
Oh yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. That show has always been something, and I think that probably just is a lot from my background. My educational background is in mass communication with emphasis in film and television,
Mm-hmm.
but also being a graduate of the University of Miami, the School of Communication, which is where I got my degree, required that you double major in something from arts and sciences. Because I believe the history of it was the School of Communication was part of the Arts and Sciences School, which is a huge school and program.
Mm-hmm.
And when they agreed to be able to break off and form their own school, I think Arts and Sciences said, okay, part of the deal is you still have to have people major in something from our school as well. So essentially, if you're a communication major from the University of Miami, you're coming out of there with 2 degrees. So I had picked English as my second major, and the emphasis there was in creative writing. So strong background in literature and writing. And so stories clearly are something I'm interested in. And human stories or individual stories are something I find fascinating because I think they're also the key to us understanding each other and hopefully getting over all the chaos. Like we're living in a lot of chaos. Obviously, you and I
Yeah.
are talking the day after inauguration day, and we just know whatever anyone who's listening to this, your political leanings are, it's obvious when you look at social media and media in general that there's a lot of chaos right now. There's a lot of disagreement, and with good reason. I think depending on where your value systems are at, I understand why you may vehemently disagree with people on things. But when it comes down to it, when you hear human stories, you'll find that in general, minus belief systems on how taxes should be allocated or whether there should be taxes or not, or whatever it is you want to have these emotional reactions to, people are the same. When you look at families in general, you're going to find there's always an overachiever. There's always potentially an underachiever. There's the goofy uncle. There's the, sister with the emotional issues or whatever. And it's like these characters are the same. You could go to Saudi Arabia and you're going to find those characters in the family. You can go to Africa in a tribe and you're probably going to find those people, those characters. And you could be in rural Wisconsin. You could be in urban Texas. You could be in Los Angeles. And you're going to find all of those people. And everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. We all bleed red blood, and we're all not getting out of this thing alive. Let's put it that way.
Brother, absolutely. That makes so much sense. And
so those stories, and the reason why I focus on that is because I think, as you're touching on, someone can find inspiration. It's like you find that you're not alone with things. And there are stories that I'll grab onto, for instance, like in the first season, I interviewed Kurt Cornwell, who a lot of you guys at MKG, you know this gentleman. Fantastic, just lovely guy. I feel like he's a brother to me. And, he had a school in Detroit and then COVID hit and he lost it. But then he's now come back from, losing a school to getting a small space with someone else, building it up, coming back with a whole new school. So I had to get him on a second time. because I wanted people to hear that story.
Yeah.
Because how many people were suffering that, still suffering that, a loss of a school or something because of the pandemic. And I wanted them to hear stories of people who were able to work their way through it, because there's going to be some inspiration there for people that are, having trouble, and it sucks. We all have stresses, we all have anxieties, we all have problems, because that's what life presents. Life, especially in a complicated civilization like what we have, is going to present different problems for people. And even though we're all kind of massed together, we're all kind of shooting off different directions. So it's not like a tribal society, everyone would be suffering the same problem at the same time. And they would all be working together to overcome it because they have to. Otherwise, they all disappear. Where civilization kind of structure affords us, because there is a structure there, to we all have maybe different problems going on, and which is an interesting luxury, but at the same time, it creates, I think, a lot of feelings of isolation and anxiety, because, how can you be in the middle of like 2 million people and suddenly feel all alone, which is something that happens
all the time
to a lot of people. And those are the things I think that primarily drive issues of addiction. In that, we, I think, incorrectly look at it as like weak character or something. Oh, this person's doing drugs or alcohol or particular behavior patterns because they have a weak character or something. And I tend to not think that. The science doesn't really support that either.
Yep.
It tends to really kind of boil down to feelings of isolation, feeling like you're not part of something.
Or human suffering, just human suffering
right.
in general.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's why, hearing other stories similar to yours will hopefully help you feel like you're not alone in your struggle. What you've got going through, other people have as well. And it could be something as simple as like, I'm getting older, or, life is taking over. I've got a family. I can't train as much, so we get a lot of those stories. To I lost my school, or I got injured, or anything. It's like, it's all temporary. I forget whoever said that, and I thought that was like the best thing I'd ever heard. Everything is temporary. And so, it's a very Buddhist or Eastern Taoist or Eastern idea. So you're not putting value on it. You're just saying it's all temporary. So for the good things, that means enjoy it because it's temporary. For the bad things, don't sweat it so much because it's temporary.
Yeah, brother. Absolutely. This too shall pass, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
That's just a thing. I remember my first JKD Kali instructor name was Steve Fristo. And Steve always told his students, and this helped save my life later, okay? He said that martial arts are like people. Quite often they have more in common than they have not in common. And when you find
absolutely.
those things, sometimes, and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing now, but it's almost like life opens up to us, or the art opens up to us, or the training opens up to us. I just listened to you on Ray McKinnon's podcast the other day. And
the one where I was the guest, or the one where I had
yeah.
him on?
Yeah, on the one where you were the guest. Because I wanted to hear you.
I love Ray. Hey, Ray, I hope you're listening to this.
Yeah,
I
brother.
had fun speaking with you a couple of times.
It was just amazing. And, one of the things I took from that hit me super, super hard was when you were talking about with martial arts, like we get really caught up in like the differences, but like the root motions are usually the same in a lot of those particular things, and we just created at my school our AIM program. And I've never ever given a black belt. Okay, I didn't do any traditional martial arts, and we quite often it was very hard to keep students. Okay, so after 15 years of teaching, I finally have what I'm calling our AIM program, and it is the Affinity Integrated Martial Arts. and it's a little bit of everything we do. And
Hmm.
our school really specializes a lot of the time in beginners. Okay, that's really like for us. And what I found over the years is that as an instructor, if I tried to put things in categories more, that was about me trying to teach more. But if I wanted them to get it, my entire
Right.
class would be based on one root motion. It might be an inward and a backhand, right? And
Yes.
we know that the Heaven Six and all of those pieces or whatever. And to be honest, Tim, I avoid the JKD politics like the plague. Uh,
As you should.
well,
They're ridiculous.
they are,
There's
and
no need for them. Yeah.
politics are just ridiculous in general. But I
Many blood-sucking creatures, right? Politics.
Oh, my man,
Ah,
for
it's not mine.
sure.
That's not mine. I've seen that on the internet before. That's not mine. I'm
Oh,
not going
that's
to claim
okay.
that
I'm
as a
just
movement.
gonna, as far as I'm concerned, it's yours. I don't have the best memory, so I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's it. You know, but so much of trying to work with a beginner, I had problems trying to separate the arts, but all of a sudden there was a root motion. And I
Right.
remember Guru Dan at one point saying, when he was talking about Jeet Kune Do, he's like, well, you have to understand, if you're into the fighting, if you're into the research, and if you're into this, or, and he went down this. But once he hit research, I was like, that's me. Because I just like to
Yeah.
learn and I want to have some
Right.
fun. And I believe that all martial arts work if you're good at them. So don't worry
Yeah.
about the rest. So
Right.
I avoid the JKD politics just because I don't know. I'm sensitive and I can get a bad attitude really, really,
Well,
really
yeah, and
fast.
it's a black hole. It's a waste of time. It's like, um, you know, you're hitting on some really good stuff here, in my opinion. So, I mean, I'll kind of go backwards here. So,
Sure.
like the politics and the online stuff. The bottom line is you're basically there was a very funny movie out a while back. This kind of pseudo scientific quantum physical thing called like "What the Blank Do We Know?"
Mm.
Very interesting look at quantum physics type stuff, and some of it I think was hocus pocus, but it discussed things like the idea of someone being a drama queen. So when you hype up with particular emotions or all emotions, it's a chemical reaction in the body. So it is actually like a drug. And so you get people that are addicted to behavior. It's a high in a way, which is why they're drama queens, so to speak. They are actually addicted to this behavior. They're addicted to the rush they're getting from it. And the internet is loaded with people that have that addiction
Mm-hmm.
to that. They get a real rush off it. And, the ones that we define as trolls are definitely like the ones that are just the addicts at it. And so, I think people approach trying to get on there at times with some kind of, noble cause in their mind. Like, I'm going to help, bring truth and set this person right. This person is not interested in being set right, at least not in the way that you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to change someone's mind, especially people that you don't know. There's so much anonymity when it comes to online. Oh yeah, you might see a picture of them if their profile is accurate, but you don't know them. I mean, you've never met them in person. They're not friends. So you don't change people's minds on things without having what Morris Massey called the significant emotional event. So that's what changes people's mind. And that could be one of many things, but it's definitely not going to be arguing with someone on the internet. That is not going to be a significant enough emotional event to change anyone's mind on anything. So unless you're getting a hit, some sort of weird fix or rush from it, it's really a waste of your time to be part of that kind of arguing. So if it's entertainment for you, okay, great, do it. But if it's not, if it's something that's just driving you nuts, I say back out of it. And you can do any martial art you want without the politics. You don't have to involve yourself in it. And you don't have to remove a name because other people are being too political. Who cares? It's your thing, especially if you're certified in it. Who gives a shit? Do it,
Mm-hmm.
because the thing you're talking about mainly here is purpose, the purpose why you're doing a martial art. And now, today, in the 2020s, there are a lot of reasons why we can be doing martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1980s, when I started, I would say people were primarily focused on one of two things, or a combination of both, which were being able to defend yourself, actually being able to fight, which is where all this idea of old school training came in, because you went in, you kind of popped each other and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that training. Obviously, there are places that it went overboard and, could turn into abuse and things like that. But, obviously you want to carefully monitor that, know where your line is, your own personal line of, okay, this is a bit much. You always want to seek out a place that you fit, that you're comfortable with, because there's going to be all different types of instructors. You brought on that earlier, the type like Guru Dan is, which has always been the type of teacher I've always had. So those are the ones I gravitate. I'll take lessons from anybody, but if I'm going to be consistently coming around and training with them, you'll find that someone like Guru Dan, Omri Ban, Win Zinu, Ulysses Owens, who was my first karate instructor, Lauren Bookbinder, who was my first Jeet Kune Do and Kali instructor, trying to think others, Sifu Francis Fong, you'll find that a lot of them have very similar character traits, the ones that I'm spending my time with. Mm-hmm. And that is my preference. That is my comfort zone.
For me, I really felt that, Guru Dan's also interested in teaching me about life.
Right.
And that's what I was there for. There are things that Steve Fristow said. There are things that Guru Dan said. There are things that Rick Fay have said to me. There are things that Justin Morris have said to me that I'm sure have been brought up. But I didn't necessarily hear it at that moment. And so the teachers I want to be around are people that are interested in me being a better person and learning a little bit about myself and life. That's exactly what I heard from you, Tim.
Yeah. And I mean, and like I said, there's a lot of reasons why people will be in martial arts, and those reasons will change. I started when I was 12 years old. The reason why I started is not the reason why I'm still in it now. So my reasons have changed over time.
There's a couple of years in there, Tim. That would make sense. It would be kind of sad if you were still in it for their 12-year-old self.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I've grown a little bit. So I mean, actually, the initial reasons of getting into martial art partially was an interest. I liked the Kung Fu show when I was a kid. So I liked that sort of thing. And so I would say 8 years later, at 12, I finally get into it. And there was, bullying that was going on. So there was a very confidence building and self-protection issue that got me into it. But I also got my growth spurt right after and grew to be, I'm close enough to 6'4" that's what I call myself. And that happened by the time I was, say, 14 and a half or 15 years old. So a lot of people messing with me sort of dialed down by that point. So that was pretty quick. So the whole need to get into it for that reason changed. And then it just became, yes, this is a community I want to be part of. This is an endeavor that I like. And then for me, I was always a bit of a history and social studies buff in school. So really diving into, at that point, I was doing karate. So the Japanese culture, the Okinawan culture, and then a general interest, as I said, I would read all the magazines. So even though I was in Shorin-ryu karate and I was doing PKA kickboxing, I knew who a lot of the players were in the different martial arts that were available out there, or at least being covered, and the histories of them, because it was something I was really interested in. So it became a historical and cultural study for me as well. And it still is, for that matter. And, I think you can have multiple reasons to be in something. So, yes, there was a point when I switched over to JKD and Kali, and that was partially because of geographic situation, i.e. I moved.
Mm-hmm.
I moved from Illinois and was in Florida. And wanted to continue training, could not find the same thing I was doing, so I knew I was going to have to start something new. Found a guy that taught JKD in Kali, the community center, and when I went down and watched what they were doing, it was closer, obviously, to the PKA kickboxing stuff I was doing, which I liked. I liked they had mitts, the focus mitts, the Thai pads. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the type of training that to me was missing. What I really wanted to do more of, that line between, say, practicing something in the air and on a heavy bag, and between that and sparring. So it's like early on, we kind of had just that. You do stuff in the air, you do stuff in the air on each other with a little light contact, and then you'd spar. And I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to get better at the sparring thing. So there hopefully is something in between as far as a progression, right?
Yes.
And so JKD had that. When I looked at that, I said, yes, this is exactly what it is I'm looking for. So that's where I ended up. And so the idea, especially being in my 20s at that time, Muay Thai started coming on, and I got into that pretty early too. So it was JKD, Muay Thai in the early 90s. And I liked it. I liked the contact, the good workout of it. I liked, getting in there and mixing it up with people that I trusted. There's that caveat. I hate getting in and sparring with maniacs that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while it's fine because you want to practice being on your guard, but come on, every week it's just like I don't need to deal with someone's stupid ego, childish ego all the time. So my thought is I'd rather be in there, and I love sparring when you get a group of people that you trust. You can really kind of go at it pretty good. You don't knock each other's block up, but you put a little oomph behind it, and you'll help your training partner understand where their weaknesses are, and you won't kill them, but they know. And the same thing with them to you. Oh man, that would have had me. And they put a little tap there. You're like, oh well, if I didn't breathe out, that would have sucked.
Yeah.
Little contact on the face, but nothing trying to break my nose. And it gives you that contact, because if fighting is something you're concerned about, you do need to practice with some contact, because that is usually the biggest issue you have, is that emotional connection to being hit. And you can have a lot of technique, but if you're not used to just taking a hit, you're going to kind of fall apart. We see it all the time, where if you do it, and it's a diminishing thing, unfortunately. So you get away from doing it for a while, you'll be a little bit jumpy when you first go back to it. But you start to find that getting hit is not the end of the world. It never feels good, but it does. You realize, oh, that didn't kill me. And, you can respond, especially if you stay calm and relaxed and that sort of thing. But I also understand that that's not what some people are there for, and that's fine too. And you see a lot of, the internet battles raging on about, well, if you're not doing this, you're not doing this. It's like, back off. People are in this for different reasons. They might not be interested in that part, and that's fine. Just let them be. Let them do the thing they're wanting to do. And like, well, they don't need to convince themselves. I'm like, look, you're not in their head. You're not their mom or their dad or their God. Again, back off. Who cares? It's got nothing to do with you. So I that's why I stay far away from being critical of other people's practices, because I don't know exactly what they're there for, and they're not asking me for advice, so I'm not going to give it. It's if they ask, then I'll have a few questions for them, and I'm happy to give feedback if people are wanting it. If they don't want it, I'm not offering it, because if they're not looking for it, who am I to be telling them? I just hope they enjoy what they're doing. That's the main thing. Because we do kind of live in a world where right now it's very fortunate. Maybe I'd say most people aren't really subjected to violence, and so they're not overly concerned about it, and that's fine. You don't need to tell them that they need to be concerned about it. They'll figure out what their needs are. You don't need to be their dad or their mom. They're finding something they enjoy, and if what they're enjoying is just the physical movement, well, great, that's healthy. We're in a health crisis, in the country now, where not a lot of people are getting exercise. So if they're finding something that the movement of it is something they enjoy, let them do it. Brother. God, don't worry about whether they can fight, Mike Tyson or whatever, people are coming up with as their example. There's the cultural thing. So I think you can enjoy culture and tradition, and also the realism of fighting. So this is the conflict of the JKD politics. Like, oh, you guys are style hoppers, or you're you're doing all these different styles and you're calling it this. Well, to me, a style and a system is just simply the boundary lines of where a culture draws their lines of definition. Because
Yes.
a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. These things. It's all, they're not enough different, really, other than aesthetic. It's like, saying your mother and my mother make a different recipe of meatloaf, but it's still meatloaf. But yeah, it's a different recipe. Yeah, sure. A little different spice in this one or different sauce in this one, but it's still meatloaf. So it's not fundamentally a different dish. It's got some different spices in its variations.
Can I interrupt you for just a second, brother?
Yeah, please do.
All right, excellent. At this time, if you're watching, we would really like for you to chime in the comments section. Let us know why you started training martial arts, okay? And then let us know how long you've been doing it and if it's the same reason. That's just a question that I have that I'm going to share with Tim later. And you'll come back on the show another time, won't you, brother?
Oh, yeah, anytime you want, man. I'm happy to. Obviously, I can talk.
Yeah, brother, of course you can. So can I. So can I. But I enjoy listening. But at this moment, I just wanted to give people a shot to chime in on the YouTube channel and let us know what they're thinking. You know what I mean? And then
absolutely.
will collect that, schedule for you to come back and maybe have a panel discussion and bring in Mr. Cornwell, because I love Mr.
Trust
Cornwell
me, folks,
as well.
Your individual stories are interesting. A lot of times when I ask people to be on my podcast, they go, "I don't have anything interesting to say." I said, "Yes, you do." yeah, you do. Everyone's individual story is interesting. It's my good friend Christopher Harley, who I know you know, has a wonderful thing he says, which is "you matter." He said, "Unless you're going the speed of light, then you energy." But
yeah.
But you matter. We all matter. And we look at what we think about entitled behaviors and stuff. It's like, well, in the end, look, we all matter and we all don't matter at the same time. It's very Eastern. There's a duality to it. Maybe you don't matter to how many billion people on the planet, but you matter to enough people. Mm-hmm. So, and you're interesting. Everyone has a story and their story is valid and it's interesting. So yes, please do share, as you're saying, because I'd love to read it too.
It'd be absolutely fascinating for a time to come back. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, brother, was I know that you got to spend time with Sifu Larry Hartsell.
Oh, yeah.
I saw him one time in the 90s, and it was a point in my life where every time I went to a seminar, that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life, right? Like, without a doubt, I saw Sifu Hartsell, and I was like, that's it. Without a doubt, and that was pre-UFC, pre-grappling at that time, but to see how he bridged the gaps and was just a wonderful human. I was like, I want to train that immediately. I got to be honest, about 6 months after that, I had one of those magazines you talked about, Martial Arts Masters, and it had Herman Sawanda in it. And there was a Harimau technique in those little blocks. And I got to talk to Peter Kwong about this. It turns out we had the same book. But I got this, and I walked up to my Sifu, and I said, kind of like what you had brought out the point earlier, whoever chose it chose photos that were aesthetic. So I flip it around, and I'm like, Sifu, people really can't do this, can they? And he just went like this, and he was visually impaired, so he had big thick glasses on, the light was in his face, and all of a sudden he just went, oh, he can, and then put it right back down. And we went to go see Pa Herman Sawanda, and once I saw that, I was like, that's what I want to do the rest of my life. And that has continued slightly ADD, Tim. That's why I appreciate that you shot the Dos Manos upstairs, right? I've been in the academy, but it'd be really hard for me not to try to be like, what certificate is that in the background, and miss exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. I knew that because that's how I'd be.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, squirrel.
Well,
shiny.
I'm glad you brought up Sifu Larry, because honestly, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think I have. So that was, talk about a happy accident. So I'd come to the academy, And I knew he was in and around the LA area, but wasn't exactly sure. And I knew of who he was through magazines and books. And so I had gone to the academy in 2004, and the policy there at the time was you could watch a class, then you could try one. And I thought, okay, good. So I'd gone in on a Thursday morning. I was at the time mainly working evenings. I was editing shows for E! Entertainment, and post-production wise, they had like a morning schedule and then an evening schedule. So my shift would start like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. So my daytimes were free at the time. So I went in and observed a Thursday morning class, which was a class that Guru Inosanto teaches, still goes on every Thursday morning. And I was actually quite pleased to think, because I thought, the way of most martial arts schools would run, especially with someone is kind of a high level and notoriety in a positive way that Guru Dan is, that you would not, as the average person coming in, generally study with him. You would need to kind of work your way up.
Absolutely.
To the classes that he would teach. But this wasn't the case. He was teaching one that everyone thought, oh, that's amazing. That's great. And I had 10 years experience in JKD and Kali at the time. My teacher was a student of his from the Aspen summer camps in the late 70s and early 80s. So I was, of course, going, I don't know if I've got enough to fit in. I don't really know, because I had nothing to judge it against. So I was watching the class going, okay, I can follow most of this. It's a pretty fast pace, but I can follow it. So this looks great. Well, then class ends, and where I'm sitting is over there by where Guru Dan's office is. Mm-hmm. He comes walking over right at me. And of course, you're having that, starstruck moment. You're like, okay, this person I've read about all this time is walking right at me. Yeah, what do I do? What do I do? He goes, hello. And I said, hello. And I'm like, okay, easy enough. Very good. And so then I had told Dory, who was the manager at the academy, I said, yeah, I think I'd like to try this class out. She said, okay. So I came back the following Thursday, and what I was trying to do is get my daytime schedules kind of cleared out, so I could take, at the time, I think there was a Monday morning class available, a Wednesday morning class available, or no, was it Tuesday? It was Tuesday morning available, Thursday mornings available, and Friday mornings available is what they had. Mm-hmm. So I was going to take all those and then all day Saturday. So I came back the following Thursday, took the class. Guru Dan was gone at that point, probably for whatever he was doing seminar wise at the time. And there was a guy named Victor Grangiano was teaching the class. He was a wonderful fixture, at the academy. And he kind of picked up right away. He was looking at me going, okay, you're new here, but you're not new to this. And I said, no. And I told him a little bit of my background. He's like, oh, very good. So it was a great class with him. And I knew that he and I would be probably pretty good friends after that. So after that class, I said, yeah, I want to study here. So I signed up, and I told her, I said, I can't make it tomorrow, meaning Friday or Saturday, because I'm trying to, clear the schedule. But I will come Tuesday morning. And she said, okay, there'll be a lady named Deborah here to help you Tuesday morning. And I said, okay, it was an MMA, schedule as an MMA class. So I went in, and there was a lady named Deborah there, and she signed me up and everything. And I went, she said, okay, class will start in 15 minutes or whatever it was. And so I started stretching out a little bit, and I saw there was somebody sitting back by Guru's office, but I wasn't, staring at him and paying attention. So it came time, and the person sitting stood up, walked onto the mat, and bowed to class. And I'm looking at him and going, oh my God, that's Larry Hartsell. I didn't know he taught here too. So his was the first class that I actually paid for, signed up for the class at the academy. And again, same thing. He picked up pretty quick. Okay, you're new here, but you're not new to this. Mm-hmm. And within about a month, he invited me to be part of his semi-private group. So that's where Chris Harley and I became good buddies.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so for the last 2.5 years of his life, I was doing the semi-private group with him, which was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for 2 to 3 hours. And then within a pretty short period of time, he was asking Chris and I, either together or separately at times, to assist him with his private lessons with people that were coming in from out of town, which just involved just hours of Larry cranking on us, so the other person can learn. And then his seminars too, we help out with them locally. I think Chris may have gone with him a few times. So that's how we got involved with him. And by the time he passed, we were probably two of the closest people to him. And, one of the nice things is Deborah basically gave me all of Larry's notes. So I am digitizing and organizing all of that for, some stuff to do. I've got all the video she had on him. So I'm making all that digital too. So I've got seminars of his from the 80s all the way to 2007. And, after I did the Dos Manos thing, I kind of put feelers out there like, okay, what would other people want as far as an instruction? Because I don't want to flood the market with stuff that's already out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you want my take on something that's already available, I'm happy to do that, but I don't need to necessarily put out another tape on some of this, or tape. God, it shows you how old we are.
Yeah,
another video on, yeah, exactly. Another video on things you've already got 7 or 8 on. I would rather on already covered material. I'd rather do a workshop with people on that and go, okay, let's work it, as opposed to let me give you another tape on what I assume you might want to see, where a workshop would be more interactive. If you have questions about it, maybe I can help you get past that. You don't need a sort of ground up pre-presentation of something. So the one thing that comes back a lot is the JKD grappling material. So that's not a one video thing. That's a series. So let's put it this way. We'll tease it a little bit. That's in progress. That'll be my next big instructional project. Is going to be that. And what I would do is literally cover, because I've considered writing a book on the history of grappling and JKD. The idea is I want to cover everything from Bruce's original teaching in '59 through, when he first arrived in the States, to his passing, but then also cover in the book what's been done since, because a lot of development in grappling, as far as JKD is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, has been afterwards as well. So you've got what Larry and Guru Dan were doing, and then you've got what, some greats like Rick Young has done, and what Greg Nelson has done, and what Eric Paulson has done, and then, Guru and his studies with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I would go and interview a good handful of these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people he's worked with Yori and Shuto, and even with Kenny Johnson in adult wrestling, because we had a lot of really great sessions for many years before COVID. On Thursdays, Kenny would come in and do a private lesson with Guru, and I was very fortunate myself, and Atticus Todd, who a lot of you MKG folks will know, legendary guy from those circles. We would be in on those, and it was great because there were times, Kenny would go over his bolt wrestling system, but Guru would also get out Bruce Lee's notes on wrestling, and we would literally go through Bruce Lee's notes with this Olympic wrestler to interpret it. And so that was really informative, a lot of fun. So I think there's a lot of, post Bruce Lee development in grappling and JKD that I would love to cover in a book. Now, when we dial that back to an instructional video, I don't want to say do Eric's material. Eric's got his material out there. Rick Young, they've got their own material out there. But what I would do is go through the Hartsell era stuff in an instructional series. And because there's a lot there. And it was an interesting thing, because when you look at, JKD, I think, was always about being practical, right? Practical for combat. And so when they were developing grappling, it was kind of put in Larry's hands. And Larry at the time was working as a bodyguard, and he was working as a sheriff's officer, and he worked as a bouncer, and he worked as a security guard, or whatever you want to call it, at a mental institution. So, when you had someone who was either on too much medication, unruly, or was, just they're mentally disturbed and they need to be on medication and they were unruly, he had to control that.
It's very difficult.
So a lot of that, yeah, exactly. So a lot of that early JKD grappling, the stuff you're going to see in like his early books, was designed for that in mind. A law enforcement or protection mode, or so it was a lot of just quick finish. A lot of it even still on your feet, some of it on the ground. But if you're throwing some on the ground, you're using that ground and that impact on that ground to be an influencer, to be a fight
influencer.
realistically,
Definitely,
right?
that's an
Yeah, yeah.
influencer
So just,
right there, Tim.
yeah, exactly.
I
I'm
couldn't
gonna knock
agree
you.
more. I've been influenced by gravity a couple times, and I'll never ever
Exactly.
forget. I still have that influence in my life. It's
Right.
yeah.
Right. And so it's like one of these things when we look at Silat, as you were kind of mentioning with
Mm-hmm.
Herman Swanda. So Larry, as I go through his notes, had way more Silat than I ever thought. And I should have known that because after the first Silat camp I went to, which was 2005, he had watched me because he was coming in during the time to do privates with other students, but he'd sat and watched the camp a little bit. And so that's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So
Mm-hmm.
Monday, when I saw him afterwards, he picked out 4 or 5 different things I was having trouble with in the camp and worked on it. And I thought, first of all, that's amazing for him to even concern himself with me that way, his student. And I wasn't the only one. I've heard these stories from other people that, he
Mm-hmm.
very
I'm
kindly
sure.
watched their practice with other things and saw what they're having trouble with and worked on it with them. So I should have known at that point that he had a lot of Silat. But the more I got into his notes, the more I realized that some things that he was doing that I thought was wrestling was actually Silat. But a whole nother conversation is the crossover between wrestling and Silat. They're actually dead on, very close. To be honest with you, and I'm sure I'll make some enemies there, but I can back that up.
Oh, and
But
that's okay, right? I mean, everybody. Once
yeah,
again,
it's not
that's
meant to. It's not meant as an insult to either thing. It's just
no.
saying there's a lot here that are the same, and that's why they both work pretty well. So like if you don't like wrestling and you're a Silat guy, I'm like, well, you shouldn't really shit on it because it's close. You share a lot of stuff, and vice versa. If you're a wrestling guy, that Silat stuff will never work. I'm like, well, yeah, it does. It just makes some of that stuff is hard to practice in the way that you would with the way Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo now, where you're going to go live and you're going to roll. That kind of training is what was missing in the early JKD grappling. So once that influence came in and they started rolling, I think a lot of people got upset when those things came around, but you shouldn't, because what they did was they introduced a way of training to make sure you can do that stuff. It's just that, you're not going to be windpipe choking people or actually, breaking the fingers and stuff like that, because it gets old. You can't do that to people in training. So, because of that, maybe certain things have gotten a little lost, and I think there's a thirst for it, which is why I'm hopefully going to help bring this material back.
Brother,
but
I remember seeing your post. You were like, well, somebody brought up, and should I do this? And then I watched, it was like, everyone, well, it seemed like a great many people, including myself, was like, that would be amazing. And, just chronicling those pieces like that. And what I hear is, to help the student, but also to memorialize Sifu Larry and his progress and his work. I mean, I have one shoot, and I think it's from shoot, because it could have been Silat, right? One shoot throw that I remember from Sifu Larry's seminar, okay? And then I had one other moment where I've not done a lot of Silat at that point, but he was showing us something, and I ended up with my instructor, and I had him in a move, but nobody understood how to grapple back then, right? And so I almost lost my balance. Well, I kind of did, actually. And my instructor's eyes got really big, and he's like, not the spine lock, not the spine lock. Because I was inches away, but it's, I didn't do a lot of the, kuda kuda or the stance training that later I might have learned in Mandu Muda. So my legs weren't strong. So I'm like trying to do all this cool stuff, but the attribute isn't there. I'll never, ever forget looking down and seeing Steve's eyes go that big at that moment, though, where I was inches away from actually an injury, and I had no idea, right? That's so easy to do in the martial arts, and especially with grappling. Do you have any advice on how to keep students safe? I know I'm going off topic, brother.
No, that's fine. Because one of the things you were touching on earlier, that I was going to say is honestly your instructors are an important part of your training in that they are the guides, but your most valuable training resource is always going to be your training partner.
Mm-hmm.
And training partner is plural. So it is important to foster those relationships and to keep each other safe. And because they are the ones that you're going to get your reps with. And as we know, it's the reps that make you better.
Yeah.
So one thing, and it kind of goes without saying, because a lot of academies have this sort of thing at the door, but understand it and live it. Check your ego at the door.
Yeah, brother.
You've got to not worry about winning when you're in a class. Winning and losing are not a thing. Everyone's winning when you're training. So whether you're not getting the better of a technique or something, one way to phrase it, better way to phrase it than winning and losing. So you've got to get that. When we're talking about safety and training safely and training, getting the most out of your training, you got to get the idea of winning and losing out of your head in the class.
Mm-hmm.
That's just got to go. That way you can allow yourself to lose in the sense of losing, but it's just learning. It's all learning. You get in there and you do things, especially if we're talking about sparring or rolling, always go with people better than you. Like, it's funny, my son, I put him in quotes, son, AJ,
Mm-hmm.
he and his sister, like my kids, he was sparring with Professor Nick Saniak the other night. And he's just like, well, whatever I did, he kicked me in the head. I said, right. I said, awesome, wasn't it? He goes, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's you want to have those people who are better than you, because you get better. You start to understand where your weaknesses are. And, it doesn't feel like you're getting better, but you are. And so, slow, Guru always says this, he goes, go slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
You won't listen to me, but go slow to go fast. And I'm constantly slowing students down all the time too. Go slower than you think. In fact, I call it thinking speed. When you're initially training something, go at a speed that you can still think about what you're doing and even change it partway through. Like if I want to throw my angle one so slow that if they say 2, I can fluidly switch it to a 2. That's how fast you want to go in the beginning, or not fast you want to go in the beginning. There's a whole science of training your neuromuscular system with slow movement. There's a gentleman by the name of Edward Yu, who was, he's a good friend of mine, who is a practitioner of a physical therapy called Feldenkrais. And he's worked on me with my back injuries in the past and become a good friend. He's written a book called The Art of Slowing Down, and then there's a second one called Run Slower to Run Faster, or something to that effect. And they're technically about running, but they're not. Those of us that are martial art people, or if you're in any physical endeavor, you can easily adapt this book. It's about doing movement slower to learn it and get it into your neuromuscular system, into your nervous system. And Guru likes to liken it to the idea of if you, back in the day, if you burned a CD too fast, it would skip. Kids don't know about CDs now, but but you got to understand, if you do it too fast, you're not imprinting good movement. In fact, you may be building bad habits, and bad habits are harder to undo than it is to build a good habit in the beginning. So a lot of that, it goes back to, you got to ditch that ego. Don't worry about the fact that you can't do it perfect. I mean, it's, you hear this magic 10,000 number, like 10,000 reps or something. And I think that means 10,000 good reps for a Olympic level athlete to get it to where they kind of have it.
Mm-hmm.
So for us mere mortals, that's more, that's a lot of reps. Enjoy the journey of it, because it is a journey, and it is your time also to bond with people that are literally sharing the same passion you are. And, you're not going to get that love and support from a lot of other things.
Yeah, totally true. This is really funny because I was trying to figure out a way to tell my kids' class. some of them how to slow down
Yeah.
and kind of thinking of what Guru would say with the CD. And I said, well, when we're going fast, and then or we go slow and then we go fast, and what we're doing is we're interrupting our internet connection. Would you
Yeah.
like your game to be downloaded and then halfway through you've got to stop to download the rest? Or would you rather let it be slow and everybody's like, well, no, when I get to the level of my game, like I don't, well, this is it. This is what we're doing. Because what happens a lot of times is you go, I'm going to go fast on the part I know. And I probably still do this. I get excited like everybody else. I'll go fast on the part I
Right.
know. And then, well, Tim said, put my hand here. And then Tim said
Yeah.
this. And then, oh, my foot's not in the right spot. Right. So all
Yeah.
those pieces are a thing. So kind of building on that. Just the other, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, I said that to a kids class and I saw a light bulb go on for a second for the
There you
very
go.
first time with an internet connection. And
See, and that's awesome.
we're,
You're learning the art of teaching, which is a whole different craft. I mean,
brother,
that's, you've got to, relate to your audience, your students at the time, which, and everybody learns a little bit differently. We look at educational models tend to be sort of like a shotgun approach. We're going to put one method out there that hopefully will hit most people.
mm-hmm.
You're going to have people on both sides of that cone. Your advanced students who will either think it's too slow or too boring, and then ones who, it's too fast for them, so they won't engage either. And hopefully your average is good enough that you're taking the most if you can spend some time with the other ones and get them challenged as well. But it changes. When you're talking about kids, there's certain analogies that just aren't going to work because
Mm-hmm.
they don't have that experience. And even I think as you found when you're talking about your program, even communities are going to be somewhat different. Some communities you're going to be able to have these particular martial arts or a variety of them or whatever, and it'll support. Where other communities are like, the community mainly is looking for BJJ and Muay Thai or something. So that's going to maybe be the bulk of what you are going to do. And then you have a few people interested in the other things. So that's all. You have to be adaptable, to that to survive as a school. You won't be able to force them if they are a round peg. You're not going to be able to jam them into a square hole. So you'll want to be able to adapt. Now later on, I think we find with something like Kali, for instance, it looks weird to people on the outside. Well, why would I be swinging sticks around?
Yep.
So once you get them doing a little bit, I would say a lot of people start to like it and become junkies. Not everyone, but you'll get people who weren't overly interested in it before suddenly liking it. I see more stories of that than I do the other way around.
Yeah.
And I was kind of the same. I knew of its existence. I'd seen it. I thought, oh, that looks pretty neat. Obviously, I liked what Bruce Lee had done with 2 sticks and Enter the Dragon. And when I initially went to do JKD with my first instructor, he had Kali too. And when I saw it, I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty fun. Then I started doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. So, it's a acquired taste.
Brother, without a
Maybe for
doubt.
some people.
That's where AIM came from. Honestly,
Yeah.
I was.
So you did a smart thing there, I think.
Oh, brother, I was so irritated with trying to explain to people the routes of motion, the Kamutli hook, right?
Yeah.
Well, why? Well, I'm never going to have this. Well, first of all, I hope when you get out this door that you're really hoping that none of this shit happens to you, right? That would be
Yeah,
a really,
yeah,
really
that.
no part of this. That, whether you won or not, it's just that thing. But finding root motions in the double stick and the Espada Daga, and Kali was the first martial art that ever made sense to me because the teacher cared for me. And it was what I learned was, just if I could just go do what he asked me to do, it'll make sense later. And that led me to be
Right.
incredibly lost, brother. But at this point, as a teacher, like it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so many people would say, well, I'm never going to have a stick, and well, I totally get that, right? Absolutely. Good point. But bad guys aren't looking for a fair fight.
Right.
So you might want to know how this technology works, right? And
Yeah.
not only that, this thing you're struggling with, when we get to the second 20-minute period in our class, you're not going to have the sticks, but you're going to be happy you just did inward backhand, backhand. And if
Oh,
not,
sure.
come and talk to me about it. And I will tell
Right.
you, right, that we could do private lessons. I'll fix it for you. I'm still a business owner, right?
Right.
But never, never since we started doing that has someone, like, they might have something in a box and have something in another box. But if I can go over and be like, okay, do you remember the first 20 minutes where we went like this? Can you do
Yeah.
that? And they're like,
Now, the
oh.
interesting thing there is you said what you showed was inward backhand,
Yes,
or it
sir.
could be called double paowas in the science, a double parry. But that also, if you do your JKD or your Wing Chun, that's Wong Pak BLG. So
Yes,
it's,
sir.
again, not, again, you want to make, people want to make these arts so separate. It's like, it's not. It's, again, it's where one culture puts their line of definition on both sides of something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a real difference other than where a culture puts lines and labels, and that's it. And one should appreciate that when you're talking about history and culture. I think it's great. And I love to be able to learn about Thai culture in more depth because I'm doing Muay Thai and Krabi Krav, or Cambodian culture because I'm doing Pradal Suri, or the many cultures of Myanmar because I'm doing Lethwei, or the many cultures of the Philippines because I'm doing Pali, Eskrima, Arnis, Panatukan, Suntukan, Pangaman, all the many names, that can be used for all the things
Kali
we do.
Radman, Kali Rogan, we could go on
Yeah,
forever.
exactly.
Yes, sir.
All the different cultures of China because we're looking at different Chinese martial arts or Japanese martial arts or whatever, or even just cultures. Even if I don't take a deep dive into Taekwondo, I've got an appreciation for and want to learn about Korean culture. So, I don't need to specifically do an art to get into the culture or even appreciate the art for that matter. And that's a personal interest of mine. So when people say, well, why do you do this? Because I want to. That's really the best reason, right?
without a doubt. And I don't know. I've not been a great student of many things in my life, Tim, but for martial arts, I want to be a good student. And I look at, our
Right.
and at our school, we refer to him as Grandmaster Inosanto. Okay. I am in a rural area where there's a great many traditional arts. Okay. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
in that
I mean,
way,
the Midwest, yeah, I'm familiar.
yeah.
I mean, you go back to the 1980s, when I started, it was all of the Midwest was an amazing spot for karate, taekwondo, and there was a lot of the PKA fighters that were just amazing from between like Canada and the Midwest. So it was pretty major influential area at one time in traditional martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for us, it was just like one of those things for people to understand, right, to a certain degree, how it goes. And when I would say guru or say sifu or something with a beginner, they might not be ready for all that piece, right? And if they've come from
Right.
another art, from another school in my area, they have to, as soon as they understand the grandmaster part, they're like, oh. And no, we don't talk about 8th, ninth, 12th, or whatever degree we're talking about, right?
Right.
But it's just one of those ways I try to break the barrier for our students in this area. I am in central Wisconsin, and okay, I'm going to say it. I'm probably not going to make any friends here, okay? But true story, when I started teaching, I didn't wear a black belt. I had all my certificates hanging up. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone would look at the certificates and I would lead them over there so they could see. And I'm not acting like I have a great many certificates, sir. I'm sure you have quite more, but I would take them over to my wall, right?
Honestly, not so much. I'm not a big paper collector. I look over here, I've got them all hanging up on the wall. And I mean, I've got certifications from Guru Dan, which is 3 arts, Junfan and JKD, Junfan Martial Arts and JKD, the Filipino Martial Arts, and then the Majapahit and Mafalindo Silat Arts. I have a certification from Larry Hartsell, and I've got a certification from Zenu and Lethwei. And then Amr Bond hasn't done like physical certifications yet, but I've got his absolute blessing to be teaching. We're setting that other thing up for him in the next, hopefully year or so. So that's it. I don't really have a lot of paper in regard to a bunch of stuff. So
Sure.
that's it
Well,
for me.
At the time I had the two, right? I had apprentice instructorship with Guru and FMA, and then apprentice in Jinfan. And for the first couple of years that I taught, I changed the name of what it was because I didn't want to be involved in the JKD politics. So if my new
Yeah, I've heard you're not the only one. I've heard that all the time, and
really,
again, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I've heard it from a lot of good people. Even Kurt Cornwell, I think, had discussed that. There's a lot of people, and one of the things I think you should do what you're comfortable with, but I'll plant this bug to say, don't let other people take a thing away from you that rightfully belongs to you.
brother, I appreciate that
You know
so
what I mean?
much. And
Because you don't have to be part of it. You don't have to be part of the politics. You don't have to do that. But if they've created a thing, like, to be honest with you, I know the politics of JKD, and it began pretty early, like way back a long time ago, and it quickly turned Guru Dan off. That's why you don't see him. Sure, he still teaches us, but he stays so out of the political stuff that's why it's rare that you see him doing interviews about it. He just doesn't want to talk about it. He does not want to be in the middle of that,
brother,
at all. I mean, to the point that he's just like, no, maybe a lot of things that are incorrect are being said, and I'm not going to get in the middle of it. And I get it.
brother, when I was at I think what might have been one of the first seminars after the nucleus, and I didn't get what I get when I'm around Guru.
Uh-huh.
And then the next week after that seminar, and I'm not going to say the school because the school was great and the people were great, but if there was any Kali JKD separation at this school after that seminar, okay, and I'm not going to say who it was or that it was anyone's fault, but so many people, this became
a bigger gap. Yeah.
Huge in such a way that it really turned me off, and I didn't want to be involved in all of that. And so what I was saying earlier, when I first got my like, if that year my instructor certificate said Jinfan Gung Fu, that's what it said on the website. If it said JKD, that's what it said on the website. So that literally I didn't have to say anything. I could be like, okay, well, there's a certificate. And it became just one of those things where I had anxiety because I didn't want to irritate anybody, and I wasn't sure if it was from 66, 68, whether it was from 70, right? And all those things that really people were so invested in. So literally I would take people over and I would show them the certificates, and I had more than once someone literally say to me, so you got a black belt, right? And I'd say, well, oh, no, I'm certified in this and I'm certified in that, and and that this is what we're building on. And my grandmaster is like, he knows stuff. I mean, he's the guy, I believe. So, and they'd be like, well, how is it that my 12-year-old or 16-year-old cousin has a black belt and you don't have a black belt?
Yeah, it's an interesting world.
It's an interesting world.
That's what people. That's what people outside of martial arts, they
totally
understand that mechanism of grading, right? Because I'm not a big belt person either. I did belts in karate, and they were great. That art has them. Guru has introduced them inside the academy, so it's not a universal thing across. Say, like, if you get an FMA certificate from him, you don't necessarily get a belt.
Sure.
Because that's more of his inside the academy judging. And it's more for him to sort of know what pace to teach a class at. So those belts are given, but there's no certificate with the belt either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing. So, he's given me belts, and I've got them, but they're important in that he gave them to me. So I like that part of it. But beyond that, I'm not in this for that, so I don't wear that kind of thing. And part of it is that, and the other is I want also people that are newer to feel free to come to me to ask questions where they might be intimidated if I'm standing there wearing, some black belt or something. So
I think that's
and
again,
that's
brother.
Yeah, and that's me, and it's like I'm not imposing that on anyone else, and but I understand, and people on the outside should understand too. If you come from a system that does not have belts, first of all, there's no universality to a belt. Only maybe within an organization that sets particular standards. So I actually, if you look at the Malmag main page, I did an article on the history of belts and sort of where they came from. And so belt system, as we see it, started in judo. Jigoro Kano created the belt system. So there were ranking systems in all kinds of other martial arts before. It's just that he was the first one kind of doing more of what we would consider a belt system now. And I think my research indicated that it came from a hybrid of two things. One was sort of a Japanese academic grading. So you have the terms Q, AYU, and Dan, DAN. And Dan is your black belt ranks, and they go ascending 1 to 10. Q is descending, starting at 10, and goes backwards to 1. And those would be, well, in his day, it was just a white belt. But that's turned into the United States into multicolors. And then that's, gone out everywhere else as well. So, like if you look back, let's say we can look at Gurdan's Kempo grades, and I've got all of Larry Hartsell's Kempo certificates. There were no colors other than white, brown, and black in those days, in the 60s in Kempo. And so there was like white, and I don't know how many specifically were. Then there was so many brown ranks, and then you're black. And I've got, like I said, I think I've got all of his certificates. So that's where the system started, that kind of idea. So you had 10 Q, 10 Dan. And then other countries and other systems started picking up on this as a way to rank. And that's just easily because the Japanese systems, and then by default, the Korean systems, which had been influenced by that, were the ones most people were seeing. So you start coming in as a Chinese system or a Indonesian system or a Filipino system into the more modern world of martial arts, and people are asking the same questions that you're getting. What's your belt? What do you mean belt? I have a belt. I got this or that. So a lot of them adopted that to be able to fit in commercially. And the word commercial should not be denoted is bad. I hate that when everyone says commercial and everyone goes, oh, you're watering it down. No, not really. I'm making it, you're making things accessible. Again, you're also going to what a community specifically wants, because it's not for you to determine what the hell they need. We're all grown-ups. This is America. We don't determine what each other needs, not unless you're someone's parent, So even though we try, we clearly try to tell each other what they need. But I think that's, again, a little forward. I try to stay away from that sort of thing.
Brother, I totally get it. Aim.
So I think it's fine. Yeah, I think it's fine. If you then create a belt system for your thing that you do, I think it's 100% fine. And I think people should be able to do what they want. And, if you belong to a particular organization, they may have some guidelines as to how you do that, or they may have a system already put in. And, someone like Guru Dan and Larry Hartsell did the same thing, where they said, look, inside your own academy, you can put belts, you can do what you want. They never imposed one way or the other for you. They gave people permission to do that. So, you'll have some schools, particularly I think in England is where I first saw it popping up, because I think for insurance purposes, they had to have that to prove it was a martial art. Otherwise, they couldn't get insurance. And so I remember someone who was a student of someone I know who's a good friend and very, very high ranking person under Larry Hartsell. The student of that person said, "Oh, I just got my black belt from JKD," and the social media group just pounded this guy like, "There's no belts in JKD," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Good God, leave them alone." There's a reason why this exists. Of course, universally, there is not belts in JKD. We all know that. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean a particular school can't put that in. And they should, especially if they need to, under particular rules and regulations of governments, say like it is in England, saying to ensure this, you have to have this because that's what proves it's a martial art to us by our guidelines. Let up. Leave the people alone, for fuck's sake.
Brother, I had my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher, and he had a program where once you earned, I think it was first degree blue belt, he also had a kickboxing program, and he put it together, and he had what he called an MMA black belt. And I was studying jiu-jitsu with him at the time, and I told him, like, so people are coming to my school, and they don't understand what it is I do. And he says, "Well, Jamie, you don't wear a black belt when you teach?" And I said, "Oh, you mean like a black belt that, like, like yours is falling off. You do jiu-jitsu." And no, I didn't go on Amazon and get myself a belt. Like, you know what I mean? I have certificates, and I'm here to try to educate people or whatever. And so I ended up getting my black belt in MMA, which is going to irritate just as many people. But I thought, literally, brother, I thought to myself,
let them be irritated.
Well, I thought to myself, like, wow, like, that makes sense, because if I'm teaching Kali and JKD and I'm going to wear a belt, an MMA belt, that was kind of one of the first mixing, right?
Sure.
So it just...
in the modern sense, yeah.
In the modern,
because I would say, because there's always these questions about, who invented MMA. I said all martial arts were mixed in the beginning, because you're talking about arts of warfare. And early warfare, before we had things that blew up and things that could fling even sharp things for long distances beyond your arm, you're standing there with a spear or sword and a shield or a club or whatever, and you drop that weapon. Is it a timeout? No, it's not. You fall on the ground. Is it a timeout? No, it's not. So they had to know how to fight with a weapon, without a weapon, and on the ground. That's just what it was. And then as warfare changed, it's like, you're not going to take an infantryman or a Marine or even a Navy SEAL who they train some hand to hand, but that's not the bulk of their training. They're not going to spend, so many hours in a year doing a type of combat that they're rarely going to be in. It's not that they never will, especially being like a special forces, but like an infantryman. Today's modern infantryman, shit, he's not going to be anywhere near hand-to-hand combat with somebody. They're at a distance. The technology is putting them at a distance. So would you spend hours upon hours training them in a skill that they're not necessarily going to need a lot of? No. You want to make sure they're up to date on the type of technology that they're going to be using 95% of the time.
You would imagine.
It's going to be stuff that's...
You just imagine that, like, if you're in that situation and you're on the ground and you don't have your weapons, like, things are not going awesome, right?
Yeah.
So the more of that's going to have the time in. I'm really glad we had this conversation, because I always struggled with the belt part. And now we have sashes that basically I bought Icats the last time I saw Guru. And then
I like those. That's great.
And I got cloth. And now we just put our emblem on there.
If you're doing CLOT, we use the clothing as a weapon. So I think it's great. I think that's great. It's the same idea.
Yes.
So for the layman coming in off the street, they see that you have a visual ranking thing that to them in their mind goes, oh, a belt. So they get it. You're wearing a black one or a red one if they know anything about.
I don't even wear one.
Being a high,
I teach.
So I generally don't either.
But the students do now. I think it's weird. Yeah. I wear the traditional one.
I think for kids, 100%.
Well,
You want that.
for children, I do wear it, but I still wear like the ones that I bought from the last Inosanto Academy seminar because they're beautiful and
Oh yeah,
they have a lot of
right.
colorful things on it. And they'll be like, well,
Absolutely.
is this the black? And I'd be like, no, actually, but I'm the teacher. I'm supposed to be able to do a little bit of all this, so I like the loud one, you know. So I don't know.
Exactly.
That's how
I
we do
mean, and
it.
who's to say, because in karate, black was the one people saw most, so that's considered the highest, right? Because that was the Dan ranking anyway. But there are other arts that like purple is actually because they consider that color more regal or something. There's particular. I think it was Southeast Asian art, some rare Southeast Asian art that like purple was the high one, or when you look at Savat, black glove is not the high one, right? So
Yeah.
that again is just coming out of the fact that most of us and society in general is exposed to Japanese and Korean martial arts first. And what's first and established as the norm is now what people think of as the norm. So, it's okay. I think, there's just a lot of misunderstanding of what those belt systems are and were and what they mean. But again, I can't change the world on that. I just other than put out an education,
For
put out
sure.
information, and they're not standardized, so it's like what the ability of a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is compared to other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners or people in the world in general is going to be different than the relationship of a 10-year-old Taekwondo black belt. And people rip on that all the time. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do really? You've got a curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got a kid that shows some talent in that curriculum, gets it down and can do it, I mean, what are you going to do? Say, well, no, we're going to withhold a black belt from you. You could discern it differently, like a lot of schools do, and say this is a kid's black belt. They might even buy a belt that has like a white stripe down the middle. I've seen that, which I like that. I like that for kids. That way you're distinguishing the difference maybe between a kid's rank and an adult rank. And again, it's your school, meaning the collective you out there. Do what you want. It's fine, in my opinion. If you're asking for some permission, but I'm
Oh,
not really. I'm just
yeah.
some fucking guy on the internet, to be handing out permission.
Yeah.
But in the end, just understand there are people out there who are going to support you. For all the people bitching at you, I think it's your thing. Do what you think works for your school the best.
Well, I was
You know,
lost for 15 years. And now I feel like I have a better program and people are doing better. And as long as
that's awesome.
I can
Yeah,
say
and see,
that,
that's what the proof's in. Proof's in the pudding. The feedback you're getting. If
yeah.
people are liking it and you're getting some satisfaction out of it, then it's the right thing.
And they get a black sash in the AIM program, which is a mixture of three arts. So if there's any criticism, it is fully on me, Jamie Sparling from Affinity Martial Arts and Wellness.
Well,
Of
okay. Let me give you an example. So we talked about Larry Hartsell. That's how Larry taught. Larry did not teach. So Guru Dan, there's a reason why Guru Dan does what he does. And it is because, he has a very academic approach.
mhm.
And he also has spent, at 88 and a half. The guy is 88 and a half years old now. Still teaches us 6 days a week. I'm going to go in and see him in a few hours, and he's going to teach 5 hours tonight. And he's an amazing person. And he just gives us all a wonderful example to follow. But in all of those years, through a lot of hard work, through a lot of, success and failure, he has established a lot of really good relationships. And he is wise in that. If there's a lot of things he is super wise in, the one thing he is the wisest in is how to establish and foster a relationship with people in this regard. Because there are people he has close relationships with that I can say are characteristically, like their character is the polar opposite.
Yes.
But yet he can still be good friends with them. And so he has a lot of very important relationships over the years that have allowed access to things that not only he, but the rest of us who have benefited from that would never get access to because they don't, a lot of martial arts, and especially like the FMA community, it was his father. So he's going by his father's example. was his father who opened all these doors for him. That if he would have trained with this one, this other one wouldn't have trained him because he trained with the other person. But because it was his father that made the connection and they trusted the father so much, they then trusted him. And so I think partially because of who he is and partially because he wants to honor his father too, that's important to him. He knows how to foster these relationships. And so he teaches things, some things he combines, like the FMA, he mainly combines and gives us an overview. And his idea when he certifies us, when you look at your certificate, it says Filipino Martial Arts. It isn't a particular style. So you can go anywhere and study with anyone. So you can take what you know from him, and it's a great base to go study with anybody, and you can, pick and choose. So that's what he wants you to do. Mm-hmm. CLAT was the same way. And he fostered a lot of great relationships there. And so we can do that. We can do that without much problem. People will, talk their shit or whatever, but that doesn't really matter. They're still going to open the door to us, which is funny. They don't mind money.
That's funny, right? How that works, champ.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. And we tend to do just fine. And we go in and, we can get along and train very well. So he is going to teach certain things separately because he wants people to see those things separately. And he wants to keep those relationships fostered in the way he did. He wants to promote things that he sees valuable to people. Now, Hartsell, his approach was different. And I think his approach is the way that you see more of the MKG approach and Lethwei, because I know Rick studied with Larry a lot, which was Larry taught by range. So he's going to teach you striking, and that striking is going to be things from Junfan. It's going to be things from Savat and Muay Thai and boxing and all kinds of stuff. He's going to tell you where he got everything. So he will source his sources to you, but he doesn't teach you a separate class in boxing, a separate class in Muay Thai, a separate class. It's just not how he operates. And then trapping will be the same way. Weaponry will be the same way. Grappling the same way. So that's how he teaches. Both approaches are valid. It's just a question of what is your community going to desire in a local martial arts school?
Yeah.
Do you find, and you were finding that this idea of doing all the separate stuff was more confusing to people or wasn't something they were looking for? Great. Then you're doing a way that is better for the community you live in. It's also my preferred way of teaching. So if someone brought me in to teach, that would be my preferred way to teach, by range and then source what I'm doing. If the host, though, if someone brought me in and said, I want you to teach strictly this, I would. That's not a problem. That's generally how, seminars work. You're going to kind of go with what they want you to teach. I will teach two things separately, though, just because, again, for the same reason I've fostered relationships, and I want to see these two arts grow. One of which is Pradal Saray. So I will teach strictly a Cambodian art if someone's looking for that, because again, I want to see that grow. It's it's an art coming from a culture that almost went extinct, the culture itself and the art. So I want to help it grow. The other is Lethwei, because again, also a country that's going through a lot of political problems. It's difficult. It's sort of closed off because they've had another coup and that. So again, it's something I want people to see that separately as well. And so those two things I will teach as an actual separate program. But otherwise, it's more like a range thing. If you want striking, let's say, you're a school, a college school, and you said, okay, we want to get some more kickboxing. Great. I've got a kickboxing. I can separate my kickboxing stuff and teach you just that. If you're a Taekwondo school and you wanted to do the weaponry, great. I've got that. I can bring in and just teach you the weaponry portion, or I can teach you just the close quarter combat if you're looking for that sort of trapping and clinch stuff. If you're looking for just the sort of JKD grappling, I can teach you just that. So I do separate them, but they're more separated by range than they are by art.
What I hear there, Tim, is like relationships.
Yeah.
So relationships with my students, because I don't want them to be confused. And if I can simplify it, that's my job. And relationships with our instructors, if they want something separated, that's how we do it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's something that is that focus, I think, is one of the most important things that sometimes we negate. One time I was walking out of a JKD seminar that was not taught by Guru Inosanto. And I had two people with me who had been with Guru Inosanto in the past. And as we walked
Hmm.
out, we talked about the energy in the room, and I was hungry. Okay, so they're like, "What's this? Is kind of different, and that's kind of
You
different."
mean like for food hungry?
I
Hungry
was
for
food.
information or hungry for
I was
food?
food hungry, right? And I
Yeah.
wasn't getting fed from the instructor like I got cared for. I know
Yeah.
that's different, but it was just that's one of the reasons I go. Is the sweet man that Guru Dan is, and the sweet
Right.
person, and Guru Rick sometimes will say something that if I get irritated with myself, it's because I need to look at it, right? But it still needed to
Right.
be
Yeah.
said. But those men make me want to be a better person,
Of course.
And
Yeah.
so as I'm walking out, I need a Subway sandwich before we come back and finish this thing. That's all I'm thinking. Guy on my left, guy on my right, and they're
You're like,
like,
I'm so hungry I could eat a Subway sandwich.
"Oh, completely." And
But they're pretty good.
these guys were
I'm
talking.
just teasing. They're pretty good.
They are good. Well, I mean, it wasn't my first choice, but it was across the street.
Just in case you're looking to get sponsors for your podcast here, come on, Subway. You guys are good sandwiches. Go ahead and sponsor Jamie's show.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was never mind anyway. So yeah, we'll still. You could help us. You could help us. We'll make that happen. But
That's
I
right.
just remember this gentleman saying, "Well, this like energy was really off," and then this guy over here was like, "Well, I was working with a guy who kept trying to hit me, like, and he wouldn't let me learn." And then this guy has said something. Literally, I turned around and they were like, "Well, we're not really used to that, and this is kind of different." And I turned around and I go, "That's because we follow Dan and Lozano. Get in the car. Let's go get a sandwich."
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's one of those things that he creates an environment for us to learn,
Right.
and
Right.
caring nature for us to learn. And
Right.
the AIM program is just based on what I can try to do for my students. And I know I don't think that I've talked about it yet on this podcast. I know for handing out belts, I'll get some blah, 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 blah. But I got a lot of blah, 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 blah when I didn't hand them out. So,
Well, yeah, that's what I say. It doesn't matter.
mm-mm.
You're going to get shit from people. And here's the thing, one of the more, I was telling you this, the saying that I heard that I liked about it all being temporary. Another one that I heard that I really enjoyed, took to heart really well, which was, don't take criticism from people you wouldn't ask for advice from.
Advice.
So, if it's someone that you would never ask advice from that's giving you some sort of criticism, who cares? Let it wash off your back like water washes off the back of a duck.
Yeah.
It's not, what they have to say isn't all that important anyway. So whatever.
Yeah, and I have a firm believer. One of my best friends, actually, he says that's one of his life's like ambitions is to learn how to say whatever in as many different languages as possible. So I thought
Nice. Yeah.
that if there's one phrase, we should just start there instead of sometimes some of the curse words is where we start. So maybe we
Well,
should
I'm
start.
thinking just shrugging your shoulders and going, that's pretty universal, right?
I think everybody's got that, right?
Yeah.
No. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Tim, we were talking like formable moments. Walking into Guru Larry's school, was that finding Guru Larry's class at the Inosanto Academy almost by accident? Did that form part of you as a martial artist and put you on a slightly maybe different angle?
Oh yeah, I would say more so. Obviously, getting invited to and becoming a semi-private student of his.
Yes.
So, we've talked pretty much the whole thing about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a relationship formed there that, like I said, there isn't a day that I don't think about him. So he reminded me of my dad in a lot of ways. He reminded me of my grandfather in a lot of ways. And they're two people that, were very dear to me. An interesting note was that Larry Hartsell told me that he had worked at, so you're familiar with the old millionaire, billionaire Howard Hughes, right? He was
Yes, sir.
eccentric billionaire who was an
Leonardo
aircraft inventor.
DiCaprio.
Right, exactly. So his company had a company, Hughes Aircraft, which was down here real close to the Inosanto Academy in Marina del Rey. It's on the bottom of the hill where LMU is. So there's a huge apartment complex city that's there. So the bulk of that complex was Hughes Aircraft back in the day. And the hangar where the Spruce Goose, which was that big wooden airplane, where that was kept, is Google's headquarters here in LA currently. So Larry had told me that he worked there in, I think it was 1967 or 68 or something. And I said, Dad, my father and mother worked there at that time.
Oh,
So I don't know if they ever, you know, a long time ago and would have been brief. I don't know if they ever met each other or anything, but it is kind of interesting to know that my father and Larry were in the same place at the same time, realistically. And
that
like I
warms
said,
my
because
heart,
it's,
brother.
you know,
That's
yeah,
that
and because
relationship piece.
exactly. So I mean, he had that sort of relationship to me, where he was like my dad. He was a mentor. He was a friend. So yeah, being a moment that was something that changed the trajectory, that meant a lot, that still stays with me 100%. And there was a lot of moments with him. I mean, it was a good 2.5 years, and I wish we would have had more, but you know, there was a lot of just great stuff with him. In fact, you know, it's come up a few times, oddly, in the last couple of weeks. There was somebody on one of the Facebook groups that said something like, asked like, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? And with Larry, he's given me two. One was, he said, if a technique's not working for you, it's most likely your positioning. So I'm like, and that's been something that's sunk in, that's stayed with me. And so anytime I'm trying to problem solve why something isn't working for me, I check my position. And he's been correct about that. The other was, he said, when it comes to disarming, no matter whether it's bladed weapon, blunt weapon, or whatever, you want to pull them off balance first. And he's 100% right on that. So when I have disarms that aren't working, if I step back and pull the person to where their weight is going onto their front foot, or if I'm moving them back to where it's primarily on the back foot, then they have to fight for balance and stability before they can hang on to the weapon. And it's so much easier to disarm them. And so, you know, the very technical pieces of advice that he's given me that were not situational specific, but something a little bit more broad like that, have been absolutely accurate.
And that's
then,
yin and yang, brother. Push pull.
Yeah.
Right? And
Exactly.
everybody's like, well, if you tried to pull them and it's not working, push. You know, I'm not taking away from those moments, but I love when there's something that's like lights something for me. Like, oh, at like a single moment where before, not so much. When you talked about the Bolt wrestling program, is that who Guru was learning folk style wrestling from?
Yeah, it's Kenny Johnson. Kenny Johnson is one of your fellow Wisconsinites. He's a native Wisconsin guy, graduated of the University of Iowa. So he was part of Gable's wrestling program. And he's only like, I think, a year younger than me. So I get along with him like awesomely, because we're both a couple of, you know, Midwestern knuckleheads in our mid-50s. And Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is only like an hour and a half from where I grew up. So we just have a lot of the same sort of, in general, memories and mannerisms coming from the same part of the country. So he and I get along really well.
I've seen the book on the website, and I thought about getting it. And one of the reasons was
I'm not sure if he's got a book, but there's DVD. There's a DVD.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
And then you can probably look up Bolt Wrestling. And then there's also, I mean, he's one of the owners of Black House MMA. So he's training all those fighters that are, you know, big name fighters that come out of Black House as well. So yeah, it's cool. And then he does a lot of work still, even with just wrestling programs. So I've seen he's been working with some local high school wrestlers. And what's crazy is how many girl wrestlers that are at it now and how freaking good they are. And so looked like he had a couple of standouts, female wrestlers, and the high school team he was working with. I'm just, kind of more following all that stuff on his social
For sure.
media, but, so he's still heavily involved in the wrestling world as well as the MMA world, and then just other martial arts stuff. So when you're looking at I think one of the smartest things he did was he took wrestling and he organized it the way a martial art would be organized. So it is, and I don't know if he did that intentionally or whether that was just he wanted to structure it in a way that he found easier to teach. But with what he did, it's so digestible to those of us who are training martial art that you go, oh yeah, okay, if I want to learn wrestling, this is a really good way to do it.
Brother, that makes so much sense. I brought you on the FormABLE podcast. Now I'm going to talk about a formable moment for me. Right?
Yes.
But Sapulawar, the outside sweep in the Silat system, right? Although I had Silat training and I had done some techniques, it never made sense to me. I could not ever do it. And then one day, Guru...
it's one of the outside foot sweep. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to pick up.
Guru...
it took me 17... No. So last March at instructor camp, I finally saw the last piece of how he was doing it that made it click to me. So I could do it as long as I was manipulating your head. I could easily do it, which is more of a Buki Nagara or even a Sarak way of doing it. But turning just the arms, I could never get it. Person could stumble out of it or whatever. And finally, I watched one detail of what he was doing. I go, of course, dumbass. Why did you not see that? And now I can pull it off. But that was a 20-year development. So,
brother,
that's how it works for all of us, right?
I know. I will. And once again, it's when we're supposed to get it underneath the sun was when we're supposed to get it.
Yeah.
But I just remember Guru in St. Louis doing Hubad, and he did a passover to an arm drag and stepped over. And because he had the arm drag pulling, there was weight on that foot. Where before, every time I did it, they would go away. And then he turned around and he said, and I got that from my Greco-Roman, wrestling coach, because of course that's what you do in your 70s is you start Greco, right? I mean, Guru. Guru is just
started BJJ in his 60s, started Capoeira when he was 70, and then started the wrestling with Kenny in his 70s, because that's exactly what you do.
I remember for instructor camp at one point, he had told, he I don't know, we might cut this part out. I don't know, but I'll tell you. But he had said that, there were some folks that didn't want to do the capoeira, and that he just asked everybody to show up with an open mind. And he goes, and I started when I was 70, so I think you're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never ever forget that moment. And
it makes sense. It's just biases we all have, and usually they kind of come from fear.
Well, that's what I thought. That's what I heard. Is not that anybody didn't want to do it, but some of us were afraid we're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And
we're just not going to look good because that happens. You got to stop worrying about how good you look when you do stuff and just have fun, which is what he does.
That's part of the rub, though, right? I mean, one of those things that when it starts to make. Well, anyway, I found a capoeira instructor afterwards in Springfield, Illinois, and I spent 2 years doing capoeira.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
It was awesome.
Because that's two things I never thought I'd hear together as capoeira instructor in Springfield, Illinois. But
and he came from a smaller town called Chatham. And so when I was training with him, he would bring the mestre up from Florida. And
wow.
In the midst of my conversation with my new teacher, I was just young, and I'm like, and I like to talk, right? And I was just like, this is so close to Silat, and I can't find a Silat instructor right now, so I thought I'd do this. Don't ever say that if you're watching to somebody. Just go and take the art, and don't tell them whatever it is, because there was a piece of trying to say, well, it's like I really wanted to date your sister, but I had to meet her first. So I asked her out. So I asked you out first. It doesn't go over
Yeah,
well, you know.
yeah. If you know, like I said something similar to Kenny once, but it was like a very comparative thing. So he had done it's basically defending a collar tie in wrestling. So he did a shuck of the collar tie, put the guy in his version of a Russian arm tie, which is extremely fucking effective, and which put him in a position that is similar for us in Silat to do the back leg or inside leg sweep. So then he does exactly that, kicks the guy's leg up, then he drops to his knee and does an ankle pick. And I looked at him, I said, dude, that's Silat. And he looks at me, and I mean, again, we've already got a relationship, so it's not like he's going to go, what do you mean? He just said, what's Silat? And so I grabbed one of the guys there, and in fact, it was the kid that I did the Dos Manos thing with, and I did, he punched, parry, outside gunting, stepped in, took the inside leg sweep, and then I swept his foot. And he goes, "Oh, you did that ankle pick with your foot?" I said, "Yeah, you did it with your hand." And he could see where it was literally like the same technique. And so, we had a blast after that, doing a lot of sort of comparing. And I realized that wrestling and Silat have, again, so much crossover. Like I said earlier, you might get a lot of people pissed at me, but I say, take the emotion out of it and have a look at it. If you start looking at wrestling, it's going to inform your Silat better. It'll inform your judo better. It'll inform your jujitsu better, and vice versa. If you look at those things, it'll inform your wrestling as well. So these versions of these things we do all communicate and enrich the other ones if you are willing to allow that.
Brother, without a doubt, at that moment, I stuck around, and I was the oldest guy in the class, and they was not really expecting whatever it is. And when it was time to do bachizados and take people down, they were a little bit more gentle on me than they were other folks. But it was
good.
It was well. It was great, and they were awesome. It's just as I walked away, thinking to myself, as someone who wants to learn martial arts, like, that's how that sounded. And I probably should just, just show it. And nowadays, and I tell people, just show up and take the class. And then you can always decide later what you want to practice. That's kind of the point anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually a compliment I got from Guru once. It was pretty funny. We were training with Grandmaster Nene in his Balintawak, and he's in Griffith Park, which is a little bit of a drive from the academy. And so we're going back, and he said, Timmy, you're going to do well. He said, I really appreciate, he goes, the fact that you can just kind of keep your mouth shut and take the lesson. And I said, okay. He goes, yeah. He goes, it was one thing my father always tried to emphasize to me. He said, people will show you all kinds of things if you're not busy trying to show them what you know. And I said, first of all, I trust you. You trust him. I trust him then. And of course, I'm just infinitely curious. I don't, he's not asking me to show how we do something. I said, Ross does sometimes, who works with me. Ross, actually, we'll give him a shout out to. Ross Toro is one of Grandmaster Nene's assistants. He's the one who designed the Malmag logo you're seeing behind me.
Oh,
he's
awesome.
So yeah, he's fantastic. So, if you guys are in the need of graphics, I know
a guy.
Ones that have all done some amazing stuff for me. There's also Paulo Pereira, who's been on my podcast. He's from Brazil. He's one of Salem's students, Salem Esle's students, and also just a great graphic designer who's done some of my sub-program designs of my logos based on the Malmag. And then there's also my actual organization, Doble Dos Tatsulik Martial Arts, which is also sort of a triangle. It's 22 triangles contained in one triangle. And Ross did that design as well. So Paulo took that design and based the other sort of sub-programs based on that sort of triangle thing. And it's all good work. It's all amazing stuff. So for a tangent there real quick, if you guys need graphic people, let me know. I've got some good recommendations I can make for them.
Or if you're watching out there and you're looking for good graphics, okay? We like tangents here. I don't even know how long we've been on now, and I'm sure it's
You
probably
told me to plug away.
plug away. I said, plug away, Tim, plug away. That's what we were going for, brother. So, real quick. I've enjoyed this tremendously, by the way, Tim. Thank you.
I love to sit down and chat, and I'm glad you're enjoying a good cup of coffee. I just had a bunch at breakfast, so I didn't. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here with a cup myself. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to get up and run to the restroom. So
I'm regretting it a little bit.
I had like 4 cups at breakfast because it was good coffee.
So anyway, that's it. And then, by the way, if you have ever,
nice.
that's sometimes Guru Rick would tell us that sometimes that there could be a 13th area of Kali called stick and coffee.
I got it.
And we'll wake up in the morning and play with the stick a little bit and then take a.
Well, I don't want to say, actually, with your mug there and you're talking about Guru Rick, I've always got to give it a shout, especially because I know you're within that community. And I always want to give a shout out to that community, the MKG community. You guys are awesome people. I've never met, I would say, an organization that I found consistently, from the first person I met to the last person I've met, to be just great people from start to finish. And it's kind of fun. I love being, what I want to say, adjacent to you guys, because I'm not really involved in it, but at the same time, I know so many. I feel like I'm the cousin that gets invited to the family reunion every once in a while, to the barbecue. So I appreciate you guys as a community, and I think you're a group that's just consistently doing a lot of really good stuff for other people in what you do, from every branch all over. I mean, because there's like different spots in the U.S. and you got a couple that are in England and one in Ireland
all over
and
the
all
world.
That. And
Changing
just
lives,
great.
Changing lives with martial art all over the world. I mean, I am not like
Preaching, all of you, and it's awesome. So I just want to make sure that community hears that.
Absolutely, and we'll make a nice soundbite out of that one too. You know what I mean? That's gonna be great. They're 3 hours away from where I moved to be closer to where my son was, and it was just it made a lot of sense for me. And after my first school closed, I had a torn ACL, and Josh Pryor had given me these camp DVDs. And I just, with my leg up, I just watched Rick, and I was like, I'm going to go over there. And then when I left the seminar, the first time I met him through Josh, the same way Guru Dan closes it and says something that just, I don't know. It makes me all of a sudden like, yeah, I know I learned cool stuff. I came here for cool stuff. But then I got something else on the way out that I feel like is going to help me in my life. And I have been going to MKG ever since, and man, every time that there's an MKG person like out at the if I'm out there with an academy person, I'm just like, sometimes I get lost. I'm so ADD. What were we talking about, Tim? I literally am, yeah. So it just happens like that, and I get super nervous sometimes if Guru will call me up, which doesn't happen often. I think he can see the deer in headlight look in my eye, like,
Those are my favorites. My favorite thing is to watch everyone go through that, because everyone does, and I get people that ask me if I still am. And the answer to that is yes and no. I'm used to the pressure of it after many years of doing it, and especially having to have substituted for Joel for 6 weeks when he was having heart valve replacement. So I got picked to go and be that replacement, and that's like, yeah, no pressure.
Nah.
Walk into rooms of people, some of which I know, most of which I don't, and you get to a point where, if you're not around Guru all the time like I am, and you're coming in, it's understandable to be 100% nervous about it. And it was Ed Kaditz, who's a longtime student at the academy, one of my seniors in the FMA. He said it best once. He said, when Guru calls you, and we'll use you for example, you're going to look around for that other Jamie Sparling that's there, because you know he's not calling you, right? So you're like, oh, there's another Jamie Sparling in class? Wow, that's my name. That's interesting. Where is this Jamie? And then, unfortunately, you realize that it's you. So then you walk up there, and he asks you for something like, okay, give me an angle one. And you're like, what's an angle one?
Yes.
Throw a jab. What's a jab? And you throw a rear hook instead. So, this happens to everybody. That's normal, because, it's a complete unexpected thing that happens that you get called up, and now you're going, oh man, not only do I not want to mess up, I hope I know this. When you know it, but your nervous system goes into a whole different mode. And so those are fun moments for me to watch. Not that I like watching people be uncomfortable, but I like watching them get that experience and then talking them down after they come off the floor. It was terrible. No, it wasn't.
No.
Just don't worry about it. For me anymore, after amount of time, and I'm sure Joel is this way, and Daniel Lanero and other people that have had to demo for Guru or with him many times, is you just go into Terminator mode. You complete machine. You're locked in exactly how far your stick or blade is away from his face or his hand, so you don't pop him. So that's what you're kind of hardcore focused on in a cool robotic way. And so you learn to kind of go into that mode to do what you need to do, and then get off the stage.
Thank you. I'm going to replay that part, because what happens is I do hide, but there's a part of me that like, he knows my name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I still get that way, and but that's, thank you for coming.
Sure. Well, and thing to think about too, if any of you that are listening to this ever in that spot where he calls you up to show something, one, he wants you to succeed, and so does everybody. So don't let that ever be part of the pressure on you when you go up to do that. No one is hoping for you to fail. Everyone is hoping just the opposite. And he's just generally wanting to see potentially where you're at, and understand he's been at this for a long time. So he understands nerves. Even he gets nervous if he gets put on for interviews himself. So he gets it.
I'm sure he does. So in martial arts and in life, okay, or a transition, is there some type of advice you could give our listeners to something that they could apply in the next 24 hours of their journey?
Oh, sure. So I'm going to say that most people's journey in the next 24 hours is probably not going to involve being mugged. So it's going to involve what we always do, which is learning and training. And so something I saw, I'll relate this with a story from 2000, I'm going to say 2012, January 2012. So about 12 years ago, we got Sifu Francis Fong coming into the academy this weekend. And so it was at his seminar, January 2012. And I was actually working with Guru in this seminar. And it was in the beginning. And so Sifu Francis is doing a very basic reference point, Haksao Sutsao, or warming up, literally beginning. Guru Dan somehow saw something, asked a question about it to Sifu Francis, got an answer, and was extremely happy about it. And I thought, wait a second, how many Paksaos has Guru Dan done in his life? I'm going to estimate at least 1 million or more. Because you figure he started learning this from Bruce Lee probably in 1964 when he met him. And he may have experienced it before because he had worked with other Chinese martial art teachers before. So I don't know whether he had, but definitely we can say Bruce Lee most likely showed him something like that in 1964. And I'm sure they did a lot of them. And he's had 9 other Wing Chun instructors, as well as the fact that Kali has a similar motion. So somehow in something that he's done easily over 1 million times, he found something new. So as a student, in the next 24 hours, we're all learning, we're all practicing. Find something new in the old. because it's there for you to discover. That's my best piece of advice, because you'll find it exciting.
Brother, that's exactly what we're looking for too. And with a story like that, I mean, that makes so much sense. Do you have two folks that you wouldn't mind recommending that come on the show that have good stories? Now, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh my God. Well, I could give you a lot. I'll give you two, but I'll send you a list as well.
Great.
And a lot of it is you can go through my podcast and find some people. But I think you would enjoy, especially since you brought up Omri Bond. So you're kind of looking maybe for those interesting stories like that. I think you should talk to Ryan Teal, who is a student of Andy Wilson's up at MKG Seattle. Ryan has his background is like one of his parents was Cambodian. So he's starting to take a dive into that. And his story is really good. And
Great.
I think you'd enjoy talking to him. So I think Ryan would be an awesome person to talk to. I just had, the podcast hasn't come out yet, but God, it's like a Ryan team. There's Ryan Clark, who I talked to, who's out of Oregon. And I knew him as a guy who comes down here to the academy for a lot of stuff, and learned a lot about his school and interesting ways he's approaching things. So he was really good. You reach out to him. Kurt Cornwell is always a good person to talk to. If you've not had him on here, you absolutely should. I do a podcast with him and two other guys called The Talking Heads. The other two guys are Michael Perez, who you probably know because he's kind of around that whole MKG group, and David and Linda Hatch as well. So Michael's a good person to talk to. And then Mike Yuski out of South Carolina. Okay. Very interesting guy. He's on that podcast with us. He's got a background that he speaks and reads Chinese as well. So, and I think he may have lived in China for a while. So he's got a really interesting background with the language and the philosophy and stuff. So he's a good conversation. As I said, I do a regular podcast with Kurt, Mike, and Michael
Perez.
So those guys, people talk. Yeah, always good people to talk to. And honestly, I could give you a big list, and I will privately. But I think those are some just good mentions right off the top of my head.
Brother, I appreciate that so much. We have been doing this now. I think we've been talking for a couple hours, and I had no idea.
Like hour and a half.
No idea at all. And
2 hours.
Almost strategically, I wanted to tell you a funny story, so I waited to the end. And this is something when I've reached out in the past, I've been like, can I get you on the phone for a few minutes? Okay. So I had no idea that you had a background in like the visual arts and the filmmaking and all that. I didn't know you were from Illinois either until as I was getting to know you. And at one time period, whenever I was out at the Inosanto Academy, you had taken us to Mr. Omri Bonds. And that was during COVID time. Mm-hmm. And during COVID time, I got involved in a podcast / celebrity tournament. Okay? That was going on. And literally, it was a guy that I used to act with in New York City. And then he went on to write for Lionsgate Films. His name is Avi Klein. Yeah, it was. So, in the midst of all of this, we started going into storytelling on the podcast. So I've been doing it like 3 years at that time period, and I had different Facebook accounts because I didn't want to cross the streams of martial art and this other thing too much, right? And so we were getting ready to do a horror series.
Nice. Okay.
So I had about 2 weeks right prior where I came to the Inosanto Academy during COVID. I wanted to see everybody and I needed to be there, and so I came back and I told you that I actually had unfriended you on one of my accounts and you gave me this weird look, but I didn't know you were involved in film. I didn't know anything. I'm just feeling weird. And that was because 24 hours before that, in prior preparation for this episode, I had pictures on the internet of me sitting there sucking my thumb like a baby. And then the next picture was me jumping up and down off of a bed because my character was going to go through some internal struggle and time travel style things.
Uh-huh.
And immediately I was like, this guy just took me to go meet Amre Ban, and he's out of the Inosanto Academy, and he's so whatever it is, I cannot have him just randomly come upon a picture of me that was just within like right after class, sucking my thumb in one frame and jumping up and down like a baby forever because there was no context, you know?
Yeah.
And
that's all right. I'm not judgmental on that stuff.
brother, I judged myself. That was crazy. That was nuts. And what actually happened when I found out later, you know, what your background was, is I robbed myself because that ended up being some of my best work that I've ever done in the show that was coming up. But the stills, literally, I'm sitting there and like the writer producers like this, we're promoting it on social media, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know if I can press post. I just don't know if I can do it. And then I was like, so I posted it, and then I took you off that particular account because I thought, you're going to think that cheese slipped off my cracker, brother. You know what I mean? And so in the midst of it, I always wanted to tell you that because now I know your background, and one day I'd like to send you that.
I know a lot of actors, so yeah, I get it.
So not so crazy. But at the moment, I just walked up to you and we were sweaty, and I was like, yeah, I just unfriended you because things were going to get weird. Now I got to go punch stuff. And you were like,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was the whole point. And I'm actually proud of that work and how it kind of fits congruently with other things right now. But at the time, just a little crazy. And I mean, to be honest, this is the tail end of our session. Maybe nobody will make it to the end, but if they do, they're going to be like, dude.
Well, hopefully, you know, this is what I call the long drive crowd. You know, the ones that stick with the podcast this long are the people who take long drives.
Oh, that's the best way to put it. That is the truth. That's right. About the only way I make it, and I do one. Hold on, ADD. What were we talking about, Tim?
Well, yeah, I listen to them too. It might not, you know, I might not have, say, 2 hours to listen to it all at once, but I'll put it on while I'm doing stuff in my 2 or 3 listenings, but I tend to listen to stuff all the way through.
Brother, well, then anyway, if you're catching that part, anyway, you'll have to send me a message, and then you can comment whatever you want, because that'll be a crazy one right there.
And I'll send all my links to Jamie, so if you guys want to, you know, check out Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine, if you want to check out the podcast, if you want to check out the store, I'll give you all those links, and then I'll send you a good list of people I think you might enjoy talking to as well.
Brother, I appreciate that so much.
Absolutely.
And my friend, you're such a good man. Keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate you asking me to be on here. It's my honor. And you know, I always enjoy getting together with anybody and talking about this endeavor that we all have, you know, a big passion for, as I do quite regularly, obviously, on my podcast as well. And I think we should flip these roles at some point. Let's talk about getting you on my show sometime as well. And we'll do that sooner than later.
I'd love to. That'd be a great honor. But I always wanted to have the conversation with you about the suck and thumb picture first before I went on your podcast. Okay. I don't know. I'm
much appreciated.
Just a weirdo. The whole time I'm looking and I'm like, you know, every Ghostbusters know you don't cross the streams, man. Everybody knows, right? And so,
well, here's just a quick interesting thing for you. You know who else did that in their life was Brandon Lee. Mm-hmm. Not that I knew Brandon, but what I did is I helped facilitate an interview, or 3 interviews actually. Interview of Grudan, interview of Jeff Amata, and an interview of Sushiabi by a filmmaker who was doing a documentary on Brandon. That I'm glad I talked about that because I want to reach out to the guy and see how they're doing with it. Yeah. It's a fascinating piece, and I think it's going to be a great piece when it comes out because it's a big study on Brandon as a person. They stay away from, you know, all the stuff that we kind of know already and all the controversy over his death and stuff like that. They don't do a big focus on that. It's more like, because I think a lot of people just didn't know exactly who he was and what he was like. You know, I think people wanted to know. And this piece is doing a great look at that. And what was fascinating that this filmmaker told me was how he had, you're describing as two streams of life. And he kind of had that too, where he had these very close friends in his film work and these very close friends in his martial art work. And a lot of them didn't know each other. So there wasn't a crossover of these best friends, with the exception of a few, like Tsuyoshi and Jeff would probably be examples of crossovers who were involved in both worlds. But for the most part, he had a whole line of people close to him on one side of this particular wall, and a whole line of people that were close to him on this other side of the wall. And those people didn't know each other. And that's really pretty interesting to me. So hopefully, I don't know what the title of that is. And like I said, I'm going to reach out to that filmmaker and find out kind of where they're at, because he said he would interview with me too when I'm ready to push it out. So, but you're not in bad company.
I don't know. I just, at that time period, I just felt like I needed to explain myself, and right now I'm still in the celebrity tournament. I made it into round 3, and we're going to be moving on and shooting more of this horror show. And I absolutely love and adore it. It's something positive that came out of COVID for me. And I just really Tim, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all of your stories.
Absolutely.
And those of you that are, if you've made it this far into the podcast, hopefully you really, really enjoyed it. You're going to look down into a comment section, and we're going to provide some links for everything that you heard here, as far as Timmy B's Sticks, as well as Mau Mag online, and then also the YouTube channel as well. We'll put a link down there for as well, so that people can check that out, because that's a nice intro into all the other things that you do.
Right. And you'd make the call for people to comment about, why they got involved in martial arts. Please do, because I'm interested in reading that. Like I said, I run a whole podcast on that essentially, and we've done over 110 episodes at this point. We're going into season 3. So, people's personal stories are something I'm interested in. So if it's something, as Jamie asked, if you're interested in sharing, I would be interested in reading about it.
Absolutely. And then we'll come back on. I'm going to reach out to Kurt Cornwell, as well as some of those other folks, and maybe we'll have a nice panel discussion on.
The group of us always love bullshitting, We're pretty good at that.
Oh, I love listening to you guys. And quite often.
Speaking of that, I'll be releasing, we recorded another first episode 2025 of our Talking Heads podcast, and I need to put the finishing touches on that and put that out later this week. So I don't know how fast you're turning this around to put it up, but this is what it was today, the 21st of January.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think 20. Am I seeing my watch right? 21st. Yeah. So hopefully this week I'll be getting that Talking Heads episode out. So.
And that's going to work out. It's going to work out awesome. Peter Kwong is going to be my guest that will be uploaded this week.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
We got to talk some C-Lot. And then Mr. Tim Becherer, you are right afterwards. And then we're hitting everything running in 2025.
All right.
All right, Tim. Thanks for stopping by. This is Jamie Sparling with the FormABLE Podcast, head instructor of Affinity Martial Arts and Wellness in Wausau, Wisconsin, as well as Mr. Tim Becherer. All right.
Yes, sir.
Mau Mag creator, as well as Timmy B's Sticks, and just a wonderful human being. If you end up at the Inosanto Academy, say hello. And Timmy, Mr. Tim, we'll see you again soon, yes?
All right. Sooner than later, let's hope. Take care, buddy.
Absolutely, buddy. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
All right. Bye.